This story begins in a magical kingdom. This is a fairy tale about Cinderella, a poor girl who became a princess thanks to a fairy godmother, but she is forced to leave the ball at midnight. The prince, obsessed with feet and shoes like Quentin Tarantino, picks up the shoe she defended. He, like all foot fetishists, decided to marry the one who fits this shoe. Cinderella, when she was found, despite the machinations of her stepmother, became the prince's wife and lived happily ever after. But the fairy tale ended, and the reality is darker than the rosy fairy tale. Cinderella, who has become a prisoner and hostage of the castle, sheds bitter tears every night, yearning for freedom. The prince is a real cheater and womanizer. He has forgotten Cinderella and is interested in girls younger than her. Cinderella is a prisoner of the prince. She was unable to give him an heir. 10 years passed, but they did not live happily ever after. If the main character knew, she would have corrected Cinderella's fate. The main character would turn Cinderella's wedding into dust and bring back happy days with her. But the heroine of our fairy tale is not Cinderella at all. Our main character is a mouse who helped Cinderella, but she has grown old and has a premonition of her death. The mouse feels that she can no longer stand on her paws and that death is about to take her away. But it was not death. It was the fairy godmother who came for her. The mouse has one last wish. She wants to turn back time to when she was young. The mouse's main wish is for Cinderella to smile, not cry. The mouse wished that Cinderella had not met that nasty prince and had been happy with her. With this thought, the mouse breathes its last breath. The fairy listens attentively to the mouse's last will. The fairy is surprised that the mouse wishes happiness not for himself, but for Cinderella. The mouse sees itself as young and full of strength. And Cinderella dances her first dance with the prince again, and she is happy. The fairy watches the mouse's happiness and is surprised by her wish. The fairy decides to fulfill the mouse's last wish. But the mouse had already died of old age. The fairy looks at the mouse for a long time and decides to fix everything. She begins to cast a spell, rolling back time. The fairy warns the mouse that the price for the spell will be that the mouse will protect Cinderella from a sad fate. It hurts the fairy to see Cinderella sad. The fairy decides that the mouse will cope and make the girl happy. The fairy casts a spell and wishes for the mouse to live in a sunny place. And the most important rule of witchcraft is that the mouse will never meet the fairy again. A new day dawns and Cinderella sings a charming song. This is the song Cinderella sang when she shared food with the animals. But the joyful atmosphere is suddenly shattered by rough voices calling for Cinderella. The mouse is surprised, isn't she dead? Those who called Cinderella were her cruel stepsisters. The mouse thinks that all this is a pleasant dream. But she realizes that she did not die, but that life began anew. Cinderella, young and happy, stands next to the mouse and pokes her finger in the face, bringing the mouse to its senses. Cinderella's patience is running out, and she goes to her evil sisters. The mouse tries to understand how it happened that she is alive, and Cinderella did not meet the prince. The mouse decides to follow Cinderella. Her life's purpose is to protect Cinderella. How the mouse missed Cinderella's warm voice and smile. Cinderella's sisters are very angry that their stepsister is late. The sisters rudely christen their sister Cinderella, and the stepmother asks why they call their sister that. Cinderella is so called because she is covered in ashes and soot. The mouse feels like she has gone back in time. The mouse is very sad that Cinderella is not called Seraphina Bluewood, not her real name. The mouse accepts the reality to which the fairy sent her. The mouse has a chance to protect Sarah and prevent her from meeting the prince. Someone's loud voice is heard calling for silence. Cinderella feels uneasy about who spoke to her. Count Bluewood is Sarah's biological father and didn't even stand up for his daughter. Count Bluewood clung to fame and it was his undoing. If it weren't for the Count, Cinderella wouldn't have become a victim of her evil sisters and despotic mother. Cinderella is ordered to obey her sisters and be an obedient slave. The Count is perplexed as to how he could have given birth to such a fool of a daughter. For the mouse, Cinderella is a little child, and she cannot see her tears. To avoid being offended, the mouse decided to marry Cinderella to the prince. But the mouse's dreams of Cinderella's happiness were destroyed. The sisters are triumphant. They did something nasty to their kind sister, who could have actually moved out from them. The mouse decides to take revenge on Cinderella's offenders. The mouse promises that Cinderella will be happy in this life. The enraged mouse attacks, and the mouse's revenge on Cinderella's father is terrible. Cinderella's father is knocked out. Now he won't have a nose thanks to our heroine. The frame shows our main character in human form, but more on her nature later. Cinderella's father fights with a mouse that dared to bite him. Cinderella's father is quite the drama queen. The stepmother orders our heroine to be removed from the count's nose. Cinderella tries to stop the servants who came running to help her father. She begs the servants not to touch her only friend. Cinderella convinces the servants that she will remove the mouse herself. The mouse thinks that Cinderella might get hurt trying to protect her. They decide to roughly remove Cinderella from the road. The mouse worries about Sarah, while Sarah worries about her. The mouse has lost its dexterity and is being cleverly caught. Cinderella's father decides to smash the mouse against the table. He roughly throws our heroine against the table. Cinderella is worried about our heroine. She bends over the immobilized mouse. Our heroine does not move in her arms. The Count is outraged that his daughter is more worried about the mouse than about him. Cinderella protests to her father. She does not consider our heroine dirty. She was born in clean meadow fields. But the stepmother doesn't agree with her. She abruptly grabs Cinderella by the hair and pulls her back. The stepmother thinks that her stepdaughter is crazy for standing up for the rat. Cinderella doesn't know what to say to her stepmother. The stepmother drags Cinderella along the gloomy corridor of the house. Her sisters are hypocritically worried about Cinderella, when in fact they are glad that she was punished. Cinderella is roughly locked in a dark room to make her come to her senses. Cinderella asks her to open the door. She is afraid of a dark room. Cinderella is scared. She is afraid of enclosed spaces. But the mouse in her hand begins to squeak and come to life. But without medicine, our Cinderella will not be able to help our heroine. Cinderella realizes her uselessness and helplessness. The mouse asks Cinderella not to worry about her. After all, they have been through so much together. Cinderella thinks that everything will be fine with them. Cinderella's kindness is unfailing, and she has protected the mouse more than once. But Cinderella was lying. She was in pain despite her smile. But why did the fairy turn back time and entrust the care of Cinderella to the mouse? Cinderella thanks the mouse for being there. Cinderella is glad that her father got away from the formidable protector, a fragile and small mouse. The mouse was protecting Cinderella when it bit him on the nose. According to Cinderella, the mouse is very brave and seems to have escaped from an adventure story. Cinderella decides to give a name to her protector, calling her Elodie. So the pathetic mouse found a new name. The dirty mouse is Cinderella's only friend to everyone. Cinderella called her Beeping Courage. After Cinderella's kiss, the mouse turns into a human child. The next day dawns at Bluewood Manor. Cinderella's father is afraid that he has caught some kind of infection. Suddenly, something explodes behind Cinderella's father. Cinderella's father tries to understand what is happening. But instead of a beautiful garden, a terrible sight now awaits us. Cinderella's father is horrified at who did this to their garden. But suddenly Cinderella's father sees someone's footsteps. Someone bursts into the hall, frightening Cinderella's father. This is a certain Duke and his protégé, the main characters of this manhwa. The Count is horrified. How dare Duke Valkrisen, who lives among non-humans, appear here? The Duke turns to his assistant, Edmund, a tall, dark-haired man. Edmund turns to the Count, Cinderella's father. They are here for one reason, and their reason is Elodie. Cinderella is amazed. She has never seen evil spells. An evil spell hung over our heroine, but Cinderella dispelled it. The Count has 10 minutes to return the Beastman cub. Elodie is an enchanted and magical mouse. Edmund demands that the mouse be given to them. Count Bluewood is not delighted. He wonders where all this fuss is going around a simple mouse. He is furious. How dare they accuse him of stealing some mouse and destroying the garden? Duke Valkrisen orders Edmund to demonstrate all his skills. They have an artifact that tracks the location of the only daughter of the Ratson clan, the Beastman. Edmund says that the daughter of the Ratson clan has disappeared. It was some kind of royal clan. But a magical artifact indicated her location, and the noble lady's tracks led to the Bluewood estate. Edmund demands that they hand over the mouse. Edmund warns the Count that they will take Elodie by force. Duke Valkrisen conjures a magic circle on the ground. The Duke asks what they will do. Cinderella's father is horrified. Soon there will be nothing left of his estate. Cinderella's father is sure that there are no beastmen in his estate. He remembered how his daughter had protected the mouse from him. Cinderella's father is surprised that the beastman turned out to be a simple field mouse. He asks to wait with the threats. Duke Valkrisen and Edmund are waiting to hear what Cinderella's father will offer. The Count promises that he will search the entire estate to find the rat. He asks the servant where the rat is. The servant doesn't remember, and this infuriates the Count. Alfred tells him that Cinderella was locked up with the mouse. He remembers how poor Cinderella was locked in the tower. The Count orders to check whether Cinderella and the mouse are alive. He orders Alfred to kill the mouse. The Count believes that Valkrisen will have a hard time, and his peace treaty will be broken if any of the beastmen die. House Valkrisen maintains contact with the beastmen in the north. If the mouse is from a noble family and tells everything to his allies, the Bluewoods are finished. Elodie turned into a girl with mouse ears and a tail. Cinderella asks her if she is Elodie. Cinderella is glad that her friend is alive and rushes to hug her. Cinderella is worried about Elodie, whether she is hurt. She squeezes Elodie's charming face with chubby cheeks. Cinderella wonders what Elodie looks like. Cinderella tells Elodie that she is a beastman. Elodie denies everything. She has always been a mouse and knows nothing about human culture. Cinderella believes that the books say that mice can turn into people. Beastmen are magical beasts that can speak and transform into humans. Cinderella is shocked and delighted to be friends with the Beast Woman. Elodie is afraid. She is afraid to enter the human world. Elodie is scared. She is not used to being human. Cinderella realizes something terrible about Elodie. Elodie has been through a lot as a mouse and is in shock to find out she is a beastman. Cinderella invites Elodie to get out of the estate and do whatever they want. Cinderella is Elodie's friend, and she promises to always be there for her. But suddenly evil villagers burst into their room. Cinderella tries to understand what is happening. The Count's servant, Alfred, is angry. He knows that the Count was telling him the truth. Cinderella is determined to protect her friend from the angry peasants. Alfred follows his master's orders. He wants to kill Elodie. Cinderella orders Elodie to run. Elodie doesn't want to run away and leaves Cinderella to her fate. She turns back into a mouse, a vole. The peasants were unable to catch the mouse. The peasants decide to break down the wall and prevent our heroine from escaping. Cinderella screams at them to stop catching her. Our heroine is not going to just give up and die here. Alfred orders the servants to kill the mouse. Someone's pleasant and calm voice asks what's going on. A dark-haired man asks what they are doing. Before us is Valkrisen's nephew, Edmund. Alfred is scared. Edmund and his family are friends with the Beastman. Cinderella decides to tell Edmund the truth. Alfredo looks scared, but Edmund decides to listen to Cinderella. Our Elodie watches what is happening and is scared. Cinderella asks Edmund to save his friend. Edmund looks at Cinderella with a stony face. While Cinderella begs, Alfred realizes that everything is bad. Alfred decides to shut Cinderella up once and for all. He asks menacingly if Cinderella realizes that she spoke first. They tell her that Edmund is from a noble family, but she has no right to even speak to him, since she is of humble origin. Cinderella is insulted and called a dirty maid. She is thrown roughly to the floor. She didn't even deserve a slap for her insolence. No one perceives her as a member of the Bluewood family. For her stepmother, she is a small and dirty girl. But Cinderella decides to change her story. She loudly opposes her stepmother. She is not a servant. But even the Count thinks that his own daughter is a servant. For Cinderella, Elodie was always the only support. She introduces herself as Seraphina Bluewood, the Count's youngest daughter. Alfred calls her trash, a dirty and crazy girl. But Cinderella imperiously orders Alfred to let her go. Eamon decides to listen to Seraphina, despite Alfred's protests. But Alfred does everything possible to ensure that Cinderella is not heard. Edmund reminds her that Cinderella ordered her to be released. Alfred swings his arm to strike, but Edmund suddenly intercepts his hand in mid-air. Cinderella and Edmund decide to talk about Elodie, while Alfred wonders where Edmund gets so much strength from. Edmund shocks Cinderella by saying he hasn't heard of her before. Alfred gloats. No one knew about Cinderella, even his father avoids her. But she doesn't give up. She says that she will understand if Edmund doesn't believe her. The mouse hears Cinderella begging Edmund to save her friend. Cinderella tells Edmund that Elodie is a beastman. She just changed her appearance and doesn't know what to do next. Alfred demands that Edmund not listen to Cinderella and that she is a liar. But Edmund picks up a magical sphere that glows when Elodie appears. The mouse is curious about Edmund's magic ball. Edmund uses the stone as a compass and finds Elodie. Cinderella and Alfred look at the mysterious sphere, mesmerized. Cinderella is glad that the Valkyrie family is looking for Elodie. Edmund finds Elodie and decides to pull the frightened mouse out of the wall. Alfred is furious. All his plans have gone down the drain. Edmund decides to make a passage in the wall to free the mouse. He orders Alfred to stay away from them. Alfred is scared. He thinks that Edmund wants to kill him and begs him to listen to him. But Edmund's determination is not immediately apparent. Edmund punches a hole in the wall, ignoring Alfred. Edmund looks at the hole in the wall. He is waiting for Elodie. He turns to Elodie in a sweet, calm voice and asks her to show herself. Our heroine is surprised and scared. She didn't expect Edmund to make a hole in the wall with an axe. Edmund asks our heroine not to be afraid and to trust him. She is no longer in danger. Edmund assures our heroine that he has come to save her. Edmund speaks kindly to the mouse and asks him not to be afraid. Elodie is surprised. What does Edmund want to save her from? A touching reunion between Elodie and Sarah follows. Elodie assures Cinderella that she is very brave and not useless, that she was ready to give everything to save her. She declares that Cinderella is the bravest person and friend in the world. Sarah is happy. Now her dear friend is no longer in danger. Edmund, seeing that Cinderella is crying, hands her a handkerchief. Edmund skillfully hands Cinderella a handkerchief. We bet he'll be a handsome prince for our Sarah. Cinderella is shy. She is captivated by Edmund's serpentine beauty. Cinderella takes the handkerchief and her hand touches Edmund's strong hand. Cinderella is shy. She has never had a relationship with the prince before. Edmund looks like some idol from the cover of a glossy magazine. The mouse is horrified. Is Edmund really flirting with Cinderella? She asks Edmund to keep his distance, but he seems to have taken a liking to Cinderella. Duke Valkyrie drinks tea and listens to the snake-like flattery of Cinderella's father. The stepmother chatters loudly with the Duke, trying to lull his vigilance. But Valkyrie is not so easily fooled. The Count is overcome by thoughts that Elodie is not an ordinary mouse. He is horrified when Zolika and her mouse enter the room. He thinks that the mouse is finished and everything will be fine. Edmund tells his grandfather that he has brought Elodie. The Count is no longer in the mood for jokes. The mouse is magical and she is a beastman. He is afraid that the elder Valkyrie will find out about the attempted murder of Elodie. He decides to act out the scene of Cinderella saving the mouse. Cinderella and the mouse understand his cunning plan. Elodie understands everything. The Count wants to divert suspicion and get her out of the way. Elodie is furious. The Count is cruelly mistaken about her. She bites the Count's hand with all her might. First his nose, then his hand. He's just like the Inquisitor, whose nose was broken in Hansel and Gretel. The Count, in pain, inadvertently lets slip his vile plans. Edmund is menacing. He coldly asks if the Count really tried to kill Elodie. The time of reckoning has come for the stepmother and her husband. The Count denies his guilt and blames everything on the servants. Val Creason Sr. knows how to talk to villains. Val Creason states that he did not like the Count's family from the very beginning. He says that he thought that they were slandered, but he found evidence of the Count's guilt. The Count hears his own voice and his vile plans. He also hears Alfred's voice ordering the magic mouse to be killed. The voices of the peasants who decided to kill the animal can also be heard. An argument between Alfred and Cinderella is heard, who decided to stop the angry peasants. It turns out that the item in the Duke's hand is a magic earring. Edmund has the same earring. In short, they used wiretapping. The Duke is triumphant. No one has the right to deceive him. The old Duke orders the disobedient Elodie and Cinderella to come to him. Elodie is scared when the Duke takes her from Cinderella's arms. The Duke speaks to someone about the earring that Elodie has been found. The Duke assures his mysterious interlocutor that the mouse is fine and awaiting further instructions. A sound similar to the sound of scissors is heard. Elodie didn't quite understand what it was, but it seemed the heroes were in for a severe punishment. The Count and the stepmother are curious about what awaits them now. The Duke warns Cinderella's father that he cannot escape. The Count is scared. He thinks that an army of angry animals will avenge Elodie. Thus, all the happiness leaves the Bluewood family. The Duke takes Elodie away from the Count and his family. Edmund offers to come to their estate. Edmund tells Elodie that the animals were looking for her. Elodie is surprised that they had been looking for her for many years. For Elodie, everything is confusing, but she decides to find out the truth. Elodie wants to meet her parents, even if she doesn't remember anything about them. Moreover, Duke Val Creason is from a noble family and a friend of her parents. Elodie dreams of dressing Cinderella in bright dresses. Elodie also dreams of feeding Cinderella a delicious dinner. In general, Elodie dreams of staying with Cinderella. Elodie invites Cinderella to go with her. Cinderella was always annoying in fairy tales. She could have thought of leaving the house where they hated her. It only dawned on her now. The mouse deftly jumps off the old Duke's back. She invites Cinderella to leave with them. Cinderella agrees, and Elodie jumps into her arms. Cinderella finally turned on her brain and decided to create her own story. They arrive at the Ratson family's estate, which resembles the Taj Mahal. Our heroine is upset. She didn't expect the estate to be small. For us, Cinderella is like Gulliver in the land of Lilliput. The mouse is upset. Her plans for a happily ever after with Sarah are ruined. Meanwhile, the Duke reports to the fat mouse guard that he has come to see the Ratsons. Cinderella whispers to the mouse, "Are her parents not priests of Animanolia?" The mouse immediately comes to his senses and cannot believe his eyes. This world is divided into two continents. There is a world, Terranolia, a place where people live. And there is Animanolia, a place where the beastmen live. Controls the balance between the worlds of Val Creason. To enter the lands of Animanolia, you need to pass the Val Creason control. The mouse, looking at the majestic palace, remembers the past. The high priest's daughter disappeared in childhood. The title of priest and the power of the beastman is passed down through blood. Elodie inherited the gift of healing from her parents. The guard mouse informs them that His Holiness is waiting for them. Val Creason asks the mouse to jump into his arms. In his powerful palm, the mouse looks very tiny and defenseless. She sees what her Val Creason is showing. Fat mice approach her, one in a priestess robe, the other in a green velvet poncho. Our heroine joyfully jumps out of the Duke's arms and runs to her parents. She doesn't know where to start a conversation with her parents, whom she hasn't seen for many years. All her life, our heroine struggled for existence and did not know parental warmth. She lived like this, and will she be able to accept a family now? The mother immediately recognizes her daughter and hugs her. She doesn't believe her eyes. The mother finally recognizes her child. Our heroine is happy. She is surrounded by her parents and subjects. The heroine understands that she has met her happiness. She is happy. She feels the weight of the family. She believes that she will never be separated from her family again. The mouse now has a family that she loves. The mouse now has a family that won't abandon her. Our heroine is no longer alone. We are shown the palace where our heroine finds herself. Elodie tries to calm everyone down. Her parents are very touched. Cinderella was always by Elodie's side. Thanks to Sarah, Elodie was happy. The mouse's father asks his daughter if this is the same Sarah who took care of her. Elodie's father wants to host a reception for their guest. There are cakes, pineapples, soufflés, and champagne on the table. Sarah really likes the reception prepared for her. She thanks him with all her heart for the welcome. The mouse dad wants to feed our heroine with his paws, but she refuses, considering it indecent. Elodie's father wants to know everything about his daughter's adventures. The mouse's father competes with her mother for custody by deciding to feed Sarah soup. Elodie's parents are talking about something. Elodie is rumored to be able to transform into a human, a rare feat for mice. Elodie is asked how she managed to break the curse. But perhaps Cinderella broke the curse. The mouse says that he doesn't know how it happened. The mother tells her how the spell is removed. The spell can be broken with a kiss of love. Moreover, the kiss must be a kiss of true love. The mouse realizes what she said about true love. Elodie suddenly turns into a human. Elodie asks Cinderella if she loves her. Cinderella is silent. She only smiles modestly. Cinderella confesses to the mouse that she fell in love with her at first sight. So we have Yuri brewing. Cinderella believes that no one can resist Elodie's charms. The mouse is horrified that Sarah likes her. Elodie doesn't think it will work this way. Elodie wants to remain at peace with Sarah. Her parents are shocked by their daughter's decision. Elodie believes that she can survive in the human world. Elodie's wish is her own happiness. Elodie doesn't want to see sadness in Cinderella's eyes. Elodie wants to make Cinderella happy for the rest of her life. The mouse's mother says that if her daughter has decided so, she will not stop her. The Duke invites her to live for a while in the Valkyriesen house. The mouse's father is shocked. Isn't this too much? Elodie's father didn't expect this, looking at his daughter. The mouse's parents are worried about Elodie. Will she cope in the human world? The Valkyriesens never refuse to help anyone. The mouse's parents promise that everything will be fine with her. A young mouse worries that she won't be able to cope in the human world. If she hadn't been 5 years old, she wouldn't have believed it. But in the lands where Sarah found herself, everyone was subject to the spell. Even if her parents are high priestesses, they are not that powerful. Even if they are forced to let their child go, there is a reason for it. Now the picture is starting to come together for Elodie. Elodie wants to be protected from the threat, and the proof of this threat lies in the future, which is already near. The ones that carry poison are the basilisk family. Elodie thinks it's all just a coincidence. Elodie's mother comes up to them. She wants to say something. She asks if her daughter's new friend's name is Cinderella. Valkyriesen translates to Cinderella that Elodie's mother asks for permission to call Sarah by her first name. The mouse thanks Cinderella for saving her daughter. Valkyriesen translates that they are completely indebted to her. Cinderella tells her that it's all thanks to Elodie. Cinderella apologizes for giving the mouse that name. Elodie's mother is happy that her daughter now has a name. She says that Elodie now has a new life, and if you like the name Elodie, then she is Elodie. The mouse is grateful to its mother. Her parents waited for her for many, many years. Now Elodie has more than just Sarah. Elodie wonders what her name was before. It turns out our heroine's name was Gracia Ratson. The girl thinks it's a beautiful name. The mouse believes that she will keep these names in her heart. Elodie is presented with something small in a large box. We will see Thor's hammer, Mjolnir. Elodie believes that such an object could even be used to kill someone. Elodie asks if she's about to receive the hammer now. Her father tells her that the hammer is now to be handed over. At a dangerous moment, Elodie must strike with a hammer. Elodie asks what just happened. Father Elodie encourages his daughter to be serious with a hammer. Elodie realizes that there are other functions. The mouse says that hard times are coming to Valkyriesen, and the hammer is for this. The mouse's father asks Elodie to promise her. Elodie is glad they don't care about her curse. Elodie understands that they want to protect her from danger. Elodie decides that no one will guess that she decided to find out about the basilisks. A farewell scene between the heroes follows. Elodie hears her parents asking her to take care of her. Elodie believes that she can cope in the human world. We are shown the fair and the city square. For Elodie Valkyriesen, it's a wonderful place. It's spacious and clean here, simply amazing. There is even a little man, a sheep, very cute. And next to a man, there is a man-wolf. The Duke asks Elodie not to worry about what is happening. The Duke says that this is Valkyriesen, a paradise for beastmen. Valkyriesen is even more than a market. The castle is the most peaceful place. Elodie will be safe here. Elodie looks at the magic castle with interest. Elodie says she's bursting with anticipation. Elodie really wants to see the castle where she ended up as soon as possible. The heroine arrives at Valkyriesen Castle. Many of the beastmen look at Elodie with interest. Elodie is shocked that everyone is looking only at her. But Elodie felt unwell from what she saw. Cinderella tries to calm Elodie down. Elodie is scared. In her past life, many are looking at her to catch her. Elodie can't just erase bad memories. Elodie doesn't want to disturb Cinderella. One of the beastmen calls out the Duke's name. The Duke tells Golf that it is impolite to stare at Elodie. Golf was perplexed. Everyone was looking at Elodie. It's just that Golf has the most gloomy expression on his face that could scare a child. Golf is sad. He just wanted to support his pack, the Beastmen. Sir Leopard offers to take care of Elodie. Edmund orders them both to stop talking nonsense. He forbids the couple to approach Ratson. Edmund forbids everyone to approach Miss Ratson. Elodie is surprised that Edmund cares about her. The Duke calms Elodie and invites her to go to the castle. Elodie feels uneasy about what is happening. Everything seems to be fine, but the beastmen communicate with each other. Elodie thinks that everything is very good. Humans and beastmen seem to live together in this estate. And the main figure of this era was the Duke. At this point, Elodie's world could collapse. Within 5 years, the Duke became the symbol of this peace. The Duke will die in 5 years, as Elodie remembers. After his death, serial killings of beastmen will begin and everything will escalate. The peace treaty will be broken and rivers of blood will be shed. The Third World War will begin and Edmund will defend Terranolia at the cost of his life. After his death, there will be a truce, and talk about the Valkyriesens will be forbidden. The history of the instigators of the war will be dispelled, but the opinion about them will still be biased. The gap between humans and animals will become too deep. Edmund was unable to protect anyone, despite his efforts. Elodie decides that she can change something. Elodie decides that she can save everyone. Elodie states that she wants everyone to have a happy ending. The Duke asks if she is addressing him. The Duke wonders what she can do. Elodie believes that she can save everyone by healing. She wants to master the power of the magic hammer. The Duke says she can't handle it and there's no need. Elodie is terrified that the Duke will soon die. The Duke says the use of the hammer will be in extreme cases. The Duke warns her that if he finds out she's using the hammer, she'll be in trouble. EDMCND lightens the mood by saying that Elodie wants to play healer. Elodie is surprised that the Duke has been slandered by doctors for another 50 years. Elodie thought he had a chronic illness, but he didn't. Elodie thinks the servants staged their master's death. Elodie decides to check her food carefully from now on. Since Elodie was in the estate, she would bring her own order. She will never allow the past to repeat itself. Elodie thinks the palace is simply enormous. Elodie is shocked that such a huge and luxurious room is for her. Elodie now has her own place to relax. Elodie believes that she will train Sarah and herself to survive. Elodie hears someone's footsteps. A beast woman appears before her, who is now her maid. But Elodie is hiding. She feels uneasy about everything. The maid asks her in surprise if everything is okay. Elodie decides to change into a new outfit. Elodie is wearing old clothes that are too small for her. Elodie offers more comfortable and new clothes. The maid says she doesn't understand what Elodie doesn't like. But Elodie doesn't care about design and clothes at all. The boxes below contain clothes for Elodie. Elodie says sullenly that blue would suit her. Elodie blurts out that she and Cinderella love the colour blue. Elodie also assures that she likes the gold colour. Elodie thinks that everything here is perfect for Sarah. The maid reminds her that she must choose something for herself. Elodie rummages through things and chooses outfits for Sarah. Elodie comes to Sarah's room and brings her new clothes. Sarah decided to see what Elodie had brought her. She is surprised how Elodie picked out something she likes. Cinderella is amazed by the amount of things Elodie has picked up. Cinderella chooses a beautiful blue dress with ruffles and short sleeves. Elodie thinks it makes her look like an angel. It turns out that Cinderella also chose outfits, but for Elodie. From pajamas to dresses and everything, children's clothing. Elodie is surprised that Cinderella chose things for her. But Cinderella chose something for Elodie, despite the large selection. She dreamed of doing something similar for Elodie. Cinderella believes that she will like the outfit. What she chose is incredibly cute. Elodie will love these clothes for the rest of her life. Cinderella invites her to change clothes. Elodie is offered a tour of the estate. Elodie is led through a house full of happiness. Elodie is shown the building where the Duke spends his time. The maid says that Elodie will have to come here often. The Duke is discussing something with his subordinate. The maid greets him along with Elodie. The maid says that she is showing her the house. He says that since she is here, he will sort things out here. Elodie is afraid that he will deal with her. The Duke says she wanted to play doctor. The Duke put her on his back and he believes that with her short legs, she won't be able to reach the office. Elodie is offended by the Duke. He called her short-legged. Elodie will remember these words and will certainly take revenge. Elodie is in the Duke's office. She asks what he is doing. She's curious about what they'll play. The Duke says that it is the doctor's duty to observe. If the Duke gets bored, he will call Squirrel to play with her. Elodie doesn't know how to help him with his heart attack. The maid says she brought them some tea. Elodie smells a strange odor. Sindora tea leaves have an invigorating effect, but drinking such tonic tea too often is harmful. Yes, this is the powder from Belma Herbs. Elodie realizes she must do something. If you mix tea and powder, you will get a drink that neutralizes blood vessels and nerves. Elodie decides to stop all this. Elodie tries to prevent an assassination attempt on the Duke. Everyone is worried about what happened to Elodie. Elodie appears to have broken her nose. The Duke believes that Elodie needs to be kept under close watch. The Duke asks if her fall is part of Elodie's game. Elodie tells him about the dangerous potion and warns him that he could be left paralyzed. In certain portions, tea is invigorating. But 5 years after the new fashion, the nobles began to complain about the cessation of function in their arms and legs. It was especially catastrophic for the knights of the kingdom. The Duke doesn't believe her, but Elodie insists on testing the potion. The Duke decides that Elodie is not joking if the information is verified and comes from Elodie's parents. The maid apologizes and repents. She did as she was advised and did not know about the danger of the decoction. The Duke gives her a long, stern look. The maid repents and asks not to punish her. The Duke believes that the maid did not want to poison him. Elodie is curious who told the maid the composition of the decoction, if it is not so popular yet. The Duke demands that she tell him who advised her of the recipe for the decoction. It turns out that the decoction was recommended by a certain Earl of Hamilton. The Duke calls his faithful knight. The Duke learns that it was Hamilton who supplied the herbs. Elodie notes that the Duke's expression has changed. The Duke demands that Hamilton be brought to him. Next, the action moves to the torture chamber, where the Duke harshly interrogates Hamilton. Hamilton denies his guilt. He did not know that the tea contained a drug. Iggles and the Duke don't want to listen to Hamilton's excuses. Iggles sternly reminds him that this is all the Count's doing. Hamilton faces severe punishment. Hamilton is horrified. He is accused of attempting to assassinate the Duke. Hamilton, in a fit of emotion, tells the Duke everything. He does not want the dynasty of the damned to sit in the ruling place. Iggles tells the Duke that the method of making tea is unknown to the local doctor. Iggles confirms the mouse's words that at certain doses, tea is dangerous and neurotoxic. The Duke thinks that everyone is waiting for him to become helpless. Hamilton is accused of what he did. The Duke asks Hamilton how old he is and says that it has been a long time since they talked like this. They met when the Duke was dealing with his parents' slave trading company. Hamilton called him an enemy of the family back then. He was not 24, as he is now, but 14. Hamilton lost everything and the Duke kept him. Hamilton stayed with him to clear his family name, but now Hamilton has shown his true colours. The Duke informs him that he was doing his duty. The Duke now completely relieves himself of his responsibilities in caring for Hamilton. The Duke tells Iglis to deal with Hamilton. The Duke insists that nothing happened and everything is in order. His grandfather is not lacking in composure. But the Duke is interested in how the mouse knew about the poison. He thinks with Iglos that she has received a blessing from God. But the Duke believes that her family would be cursed, but he has no other explanation. The Duke decides to ask the mouse personally. Elodie is summoned by the Duke again. The Duke asks her how she knew everything. Elodie thinks about what she can come up with as an excuse. But she remembers how Hamilton graduated, and the Duke makes her feel uneasy. She lies that she ate a lot of the same thing. She allegedly was very sick and did not eat anything, so she often got poisoned. The mouse thinks that you have to be careful with any food. Before meeting Sarah, she felt the weight of food deeply. When she was having trouble taking care of herself, another mouse extended a helping paw to her. She learned everything about food and water thanks to her new friend. She learned how to run away from problems and even how to have fun. This mouse was her benefactor. It doesn't look like our heroine is lying. But then her friend died after eating rat poison. Our heroine had a hard time accepting the death of her friend. So, using playing doctor as an excuse, she checked his lordship's food. Elodie cries. She doesn't want to see more deaths. She doesn't want to see the good Duke die. The Duke doesn't even know what to do with this child. The Duke asks Elodie not to cry anymore and does not want to disturb her memory. Elodie didn't mean to cry, but she remembered the sad past. Hamilton was to blame for daring to poison the Duke. Elodie doesn't know why she's glad the Duke is alive. She wonders what else could have led to the Duke's death. Elodie decides to question the Duke about everything suspicious. He asks her why she addresses him as "Your Lordship." He asks our heroine to call him grandfather. He asks affectionately. Elodie is very surprised by his gentle tone and change in mood. The Duke asks Elodie to call him grandfather from now on. Then he decides to go somewhere with her. The Duke believes that he must repay the mouse and he has a request for her. The kettle is foaming from the unbearable temperature. The onion is cut at the speed of sound. We find ourselves in the kitchen, where we have almost a Gordon Ramsay show battle. Our heroine is shocked. She is now a participant in Gordon Ramsay's show. But our Duke wants Elodie to play doctor in the kitchen. Elodie is afraid that the cooks will try to drive her away. Elodie knows she is shunned and considered unclean, so she wants to leave as soon as possible. The Duke asks her carefully if she wants to leave. Elodie is eager to leave the room. The Duke is curious whether the mouse really wants to hide from everyone all his life. Elodie feels uneasy about both the Duke and the kitchen. Elodie realizes that the Duke has noticed that she is afraid of the kitchen and society. Elodie begins to have a panic attack. Elodie is afraid that she will be stabbed to death by maniacs, cooks. Elodie envisions a dark future with her death. They tell her that she was scared by the chef's face. Local Gordon Ramsay is asked not to frighten the girl and to take action. The cooks surprisingly don't act in a scary way, and they are all beastmen. Elodie is shocked. She didn't expect such a smiling atmosphere from them. Elodie realizes that the Duke asked all the servants not to frighten her. Elodie decides not to be afraid. She thinks she needs to try to break the Ratson's spell. The cook, on the contrary, welcomes her very warmly and cordially. The cook is a young half-rabbit, and she offers delicious cookies. Surprisingly, no one wants to offend Elodie. Elodie says she came to check on her grandfather's food. The cooks are delighted with her. It's as if they were waiting for these words. Elodie decides to act confident. Elodie has been an elite mouse all her life. Elodie knows that this is her first time writing, so she is very nervous. Elodie is making a menu for the old Duke. The Duke decides that he will take charge of Elodie's education. He is surprised that Elodie ate only healthy food. Elodie doesn't understand if she hasn't been eating well. The chefs assure Elodie that there are many dishes in the world. They decide to treat her to a nut cake and delicious milk. Elodie wonders if they only serve flour dishes here. Elodie is delighted with the delicious honey cake decorated with nuts and flowers. The cooks are happy that Elodie is full and likes their food. The Duke is curious if the cake is really that delicious. Elodie decides to feed her grandpa some cake from her hand. The Duke looks at her for a long time, unblinking. The Duke likes the cake and can't help but agree with her. The Duke was born a knight, and this is the first time he has eaten such food. Elodie is determined to find out what caused this grandpa's death in his past life. She asks the Duke about his taste preferences. Elodie decides to express her feelings. She tells the old Duke that the main thing in food is the meaning behind it. She compares food to the fact that she also doesn't like clothes, but thanks to Cinderella, she fell in love with them. She knows that Cinderella thinks of her when she chooses her clothes and encourages the Duke to think of her too when he eats. Elodie remembers how Cinderella always wanted to have a snack with her. Elodie believes that food and the offer to eat have their own special meaning. Elodie cheerfully asks him if he really doesn't think twice and if he really doesn't have any special food. After her words, the Duke begins to think about how he lived before. The Duke denies everything Elodie said. He gently pinches her chubby cheek and says that she tells the story well. The Duke suggests that Elodie spend more time in the kitchen and eat her fill. The Duke allows Elodie to roam the entire castle. But the Duke also warns that there is a place in the castle where she should not go, just like in Beauty and the Beast. But the name of the place, Serenity Castle, on the contrary evokes calm, and Elodie is curious about what the castle hides within. An innocent question escapes Elodie's lips, what's in the castle, and the atmosphere changes abruptly. The atmosphere changed, the Duke's smile faded, and he became gloomy again. The reason why Elodie can't go there is his grandson. Elodie didn't even know that the old Duke had another grandson. The Duke has 3 grandsons. The first we met was Edmund, the future leader of the estate, and Animanolia. The second is Zenobia, the greedy and bitchy grandson. The third grandson, Charon, never overcame his hereditary disease and died at an early age. Elodie decided that if the third grandson was alive in this time, he wouldn't do anything to her. Elodie thinks that perhaps the grandfather meant the second grandson. Elodie strolls through the mansion, which resembles the noble estates of Russia, with gardens and Baroque architecture. The maid asks if she is feeling well. With Cinderella, time flew by and there were lots of delicious things. But Elodie can't spend that much time. Suddenly, a black, shiny snake crawls across the field. Elodie is scared. The maid is also worried. Elodie points to the bushes, saying there is a snake there. The maid reassures her, saying that this is a common occurrence on the estate. Elodie is afraid that a basilisk might live in the estate. Besides the beastmen, there are no snakes here, no royal boa family, and no Kingsville. Elodie asks a question about the basilisks, and the maid is amazed. How did Elodie know about this family? Elodie decides to get out of it. She can't just say that she died in a past life and is living again. The maid reassures her, saying that there are no such people here. Basilisks are a very dark race and they live, like Count Dracula, in a dark mansion on the mountain. These basilisks emerge from their secret chambers when the world becomes threatened. Elodie believes that they should meet in person. Elodie decides to get more information. Elodie notices something ahead. She sees beautiful blue colors. They seem to be bells. The maid asks Elodie to be careful, but she doesn't listen. Elodie invites the squirrel to look at the flowers. These bells are lobelia, a medicinal plant. Elodie tells the maid that they are used for detoxification. Elodie chatters with interest about the properties of flowers and their benefits. But the maid's face suddenly changed, and fear was reflected on her. A dark-haired boy who exudes danger approaches from behind Elodie. He is dark-haired, dark-skinned, and has ruby eyes, reminiscent of Nico from Percy Jackson. He is so dark. The maid immediately runs up to Elodie, asking her to step aside. Squirrel is scared. She, hugging Elodie to her chest, asks the mysterious child what brought him here. The child they met was the Duke's youngest grandson, Charon. Charon has no face. He is like the ruler of the underworld, gloomy and cold. Elodie realizes that at this time the third grandson is still alive. Grandfather spoke about the most dangerous grandson, the third one. Elodie has no idea how her third grandson managed to survive. Karen exudes an ominous and deadly aura. But at the same time, the look in his ruby eyes is sad and melancholic. Elodie believes that the boy's illness is contagious and everyone is avoiding him. But Elodie understands that the maid is not just afraid of him. The fear that comes from the boy is the fear of prey in front of a predator. The boy looks at Elodie for a long time, studying her with his ruby eyes. Then he just leaves without saying a word. Elodie asks the maid to wait for her there. Elodie decided to run after the young master. Elodie approaches Karen hesitantly and timidly. People who harm small animals are much scarier than the boy. She feels that the third lord is unlikely to believe her. Elodie decides to break the silence and turn to Karen. She happily hands him a bunch of flowers so that he won't be bitten by a snake. The boy turns around and looks extremely surprised. Elodie thinks he is hesitant to approach her. She leaves him medicinal herbs, warning him about snakes. Elodie joyfully says goodbye to Karen, despite the fright of the maid, who is simply terrified of Karen. Charon is surprised. No one has spoken to him so carefree for a long time. Charon could not even imagine that he would encounter Ratson. The boy looked at the flowers with apprehension for a long time, as if they were ready to bite him. He slowly removes the black and lacquered gloves from his thin hands. Charon squats down and reaches for the flowers. But the flowers die in his hands. It seems the deadly duke has fled from his manhwa here, abandoning the black maid. For Karen, nothing makes sense. He believes that there is nothing he can hope for to get rid of the curse. The boy goes into a dark and deep cave. Probably this is his secret room. Elodie is simply uneasy about the duke's grandson. The maid is so afraid of Karen that she forced the heroine to wash herself. Elodie decides to have a snack with Cinderella. She is very tired. But on Elodie's way, a maniacal-looking servant appears. Elodie is scared. She is afraid of the grey wolf. But he too was afraid of her because of her loud and clear voice. The wolf regrets scaring Elodie again. This is how Elodie meets Golf, the commander of the Silver Wolf Squad. Elodie realizes that she has offended the wolf. Golf is very ashamed that he frightened little Elodie again. Elodie decides to get used to the wolf, and he is glad that she allows him to be with her. Golf is glad that he got along with the girl and wants to celebrate it. It turns out that Golf was seeing a guest off, which is why he ended up here. He says that the guest really wanted to meet Sarah. Elodie looks at the guest and immediately recognizes someone in him. This green-haired elf is Weston, servant of the tyrant prince. In a past life, it was this rascal who found Cinderella's glass slipper. It was he who realized that only Cinderella could put on the slipper. It was enchanted by the fairy's magic. It was Weston who set out to find Cinderella. Now Elodie's nightmare is repeating itself. Weston has found Cinderella. He feeds Cinderella with unfulfilled dreams of a happy marriage with His Majesty and that he will love her all his life. But we remember that Cinderella didn't have a happily ever after, and the prince went off to be with another woman. Satan constantly argued with Cinderella, telling her about the prince's new girlfriend. He reproached Cinderella for having become a symbol thanks to him, Weston. He reproached Cinderella for stealing Weston's attention and position and demanded that our heroine humiliate herself before the prince. Elodie decides to immediately separate Weston from Cinderella. Elodie calls Golf to her. She demands that he carry her to Weston in his arms. Golf acts more like a dog. He likes to hug and carry children. He suddenly picks up Elodie and carries her in his arms. Elodie asks Golf to rush faster to stop Weston. Cinderella asks Weston to leave her alone, but this snake crawls towards her. He tries to seduce the heroine at a social ball. He wants to invite Cinderella to the prince's birthday. Cinderella says that there is no need to send an invitation to the house and she will not come. Weston wonders if she is adopted or born out of wedlock. He believes that Cinderella could become the prince's new concubine. Cinderella doesn't want to listen to Weston anymore. Weston continues to tempt her with promises that the prince will marry her as soon as he sees her. For Satan is so impudent that he invites her to be with him. Our Elodie attacks the annoying Weston. Weston is knocked out. Elodie beat him with Melnir's magic hammer. Now Elodie is banned from Marvel. Elodie believes she did the right thing by knocking out Weston. Cinderella is impressed by Elodie and asks what made her fly so high. Elodie tries to calm her down and get her away from Weston. Golf tells the heroines about Weston. Elodie says that everything is fine. Golf didn't know what kind of snake he let in. Weston appears to have been severely hammered. Some blue lights are flying out of Weston's bag. There are tiny fireflies flying around, and it's beautiful. A loud voice asks what the noise is, but there is no fight. The Duke and Eagles appear. They came to the noise. The Duke is curious about what's going on here. A cunning plan came into Elodie's head. That's what she's called, a cunning mouse. Elodie decides to drive away Master Whetson once and for all. Whetson looks exhausted and sleepy. Whetson is bound hand and foot and does not understand what is happening. Whetson begins to threaten the Duke in the spirit of how dare he, this is a termination of the contract and so on. The Duke only thanks him for his compliments and threats. There is an ominous aura around the old man. Now he will grind Whetson into dust for insulting Cinderella. Whetson vehemently defends himself by saying he was simply sending out invitations and denies any wrongdoing. But the Duke has more faith in our Elodie. Luck is on her side. The Duke trusts Elodie and is grateful to her, so Whetson is in trouble. The Duke accuses him and Elodie of stealing a precious thing and attempting to attack Cinderella. Whetson giggles. They have no evidence of his guilt. Elodie opens his travel bag, and it turns out the fireflies are crudely painted cotton from the Valkyriesen house. Whetson panicked, like a clap. The fireflies were in the hands of his enemies. This cotton is like a living being, and everyone who owns it uses mana. It is a very rare commodity. Elodie discovered the secret of magic possession by the prince who destroyed Cinderella. The cotton was delivered to him by Whetson, who stole it from the good Duke. The Duke says that cotton grows only on his property and Whetson stole it from them. Whetson felt uneasy about what he heard. The Duke orders that Whetson be dealt with. Whetson has violated the third statute of the magical code regarding removing things from the estate and is banned from appearing here for 3 years. Whetson is shocked. Is such a severe punishment really awaiting him? But Whetson still faces having his wrist chopped off for stealing cotton. Whetson begs them not to do this, as he was simply following the prince's orders. Whetson demands to be allowed to contact the prince. A magic crystal ball is brought into the hall. A young man appears in it, similar to Gin from the anime Bleach, who heard the entire conversation. Elodie immediately bristles as she looks at Ichimaru Gin. The prince rudely interrupts Whetson, not listening to his pleas for help. He frames Whetson for the theft of jewelry. The prince claims that he did not want the stolen item at all. The prince accuses his faithful servant of stealing other things. The prince remembers how Whetson brought him expensive things, pampering him. The prince states that if he had known about Whetson's tricks, he would never have accepted his gifts. Whetson tries to justify himself to the prince. In short, the prince abandons Whetson to his fate. Whetson tries to prove to the prince that he did everything out of loyalty to him, but the prince asks the Duke to deal harshly with Whetson. Elodie believes that the prince is a real bastard since he frames his subordinate for his crimes. Elodie wants to have a fight with Whetson and the prince. Thus begins the confrontation between the prince and Elodie. Elodie is ready to accept the prince's challenge and fight him so that Cinderella can have a happy ending. Thanks to Elodie and her memory of her past life, the meeting between the prince and Cinderella was delayed. Elodie was very worried that the Duke would be angry with Cinderella, but everything worked out. Weston was bullied a lot by his father. Elodie wants to relax with Cinderella. But Cinderella comes out very gloomy and sad. Elodie decides to find out the reason for Cinderella's sadness. Cinderella looks at the mouse for a long time and leaves. Elodie tries to find out the reason. Cinderella tells her it's not about Weston. She asks the mouse why she got involved with the prince. Cinderella says that she found things in Elodie's room that could be used to contact the prince. Cinderella is very upset. She thinks that she has interfered with something. Elodie tries to calm Cinderella down, and she says that there is nothing that Cinderella knows, that she has nothing to hide. But Cinderella looks at her with concern. Elodie doesn't want to upset Cinderella, who is jealous for no reason, and suspects her of keeping personal secrets from her. Elodie wanted Cinderella to live a new life, and there would be no secrets between them. Elodie decides to be honest with Cinderella. Cinderella wonders why the mouse likes her so much. What does she protect? By the way, yes. Elodie tells her that she has a right to love. Elodie was a simple field mouse, and only Cinderella paid attention to her. But Cinderella didn't have the power to protect herself in her past life. Cinderella thinks that Elodie is absolutely adorable because she loves her. Elodie is surprised by what Cinderella said. We have a drama. Cinderella was given brains. She realized what a fool she was, that she lived with relatives who humiliated her. She agreed to the role assigned to her as a servant because she loved her family. Well, she's a fool, just a dumb blonde. But Cinderella made a friend and her life became easier. Elodie was the light of Cinderella's life and her common sense. But Cinderella finally got her wits about her, and she decided that she wouldn't wait for the prince and would protect Elodie. Elodie is happy and, along with us, surprised by Cinderella's spiritual growth. Elodie asks Cinderella for forgiveness for holding her back. Cinderella says that now they will share adversity together. But Elodie still decides to protect Cinderella from the impending danger, the prince and the ball. The action moves to the next day at the estate. No matter how hard Weston tried, all relations with him were severed. Weston, Elodie hears, is now disinherited. His father and the Viscount apologized for his antics, but unfortunately for Elodie, bloodthirsty as she is, they didn't cut off her wrist. But the Duke no longer trusts his former business partner Weston and his family. Weston's father was furious with the Duke's decisions and exiled his son to a monastery. Elodie wonders what the magical cotton is doing here. The fireflies, now that it's all over. It's just that the Ratson family contains the power of the gods needed for Animanolia. Fireflies follow Ratson because they feel good about the energy. Elodie learns that her kind are not werewolves at all. Iggles and Elodie come to the conclusion that the Ratsons are enchanted people. Iggles decided to check out the rumors about the Ratsons. Iggles feels the magical energy of the Ratsons and can hardly contain himself. Elodie realizes that all beastmen feel magical power. Elodie is afraid that the beastmen will eat her to gain power. The Duke and Iggles reassure her too. They don't know how she will adapt to the estate. The Duke asks not to talk to her, and Iggles asks what they should do then. Iggles feels like the Duke pays too much attention to Elodie than to him. The Duke asks Iggles what will happen to the prince. Now a new trouble awaits the mouse. The prince wants to come here in person. The Duke barely manages to calm Elodie down. Elodie can't even imagine that the prince will come in person. The Duke believes that Elodie should have a weapon on her. Elodie is glad that the Duke will not take Melnir's hammer from her. The Duke asks Elodie not to attack the prince. Elodie understands that she won't kill the prince so easily. Elodie decides to use someone's help to save Cinderella from the prince. Grandfather and Edmund are not suitable because they do not know everything, and they have a high status. The prince's actions should not be a subject of controversy. Iggles wants to help her, but Elodie comes up with another plan. She decides to ask her grandfather for something. Elodie wants to see the knightly order. We arrive at the knights' training ground. Elodie is sitting on Golf's shoulders and they are waiting for something. The knights whisper to each other and they cannot get closer to the girl. Golf states that he has an announcement to make. The knights listen to him attentively. Elodie begins the announcement to the knights. Elodie is going to create a team and give them a mission. The prince arrived at the estate, but he was looking for someone to do harm to. You can ask your grandfather to intervene, but that will lead to problems. The mouse wants to scare the prince so that he won't come near Cinderella at all. All the knights want Elodie's secret mission. Golf asks them to keep quiet. Also, the knights' mission is limited to 5 participants. The knights begin to fight for a place in the mission. Elodie demands that they have acting. A young man, beautiful as Apollo, appears before them, Leopold, Commander-in-Chief of the Order of the Golden Knights. Golf immediately bristles and orders him to disappear. Leopold is surprised that she didn't know about him. Leopold invites his girls, nicknamed princesses, to participate in the mission. Elodie is curious about the princesses. Spectacular women, beast people, approach them. Leopold says he has a pride because he has lion-like habits. The knights ask if Leopold really walks on 4 legs. Leopold complains that he has fallen under rebellion. Elodie decides that the wolves are enough for her, and Leopold is a real womanizer. The knights remind Leopold that he dared to speak to Elodie. And so the day passes in the sunny estate. A few days later, Edmund is working in the library. Someone approaches Edmund, interrupting his reading. This is Cesare Medino Silveria, Prince of the Empire. Edmund does not try to be kind. He is not happy with the prince. Cesare slyly tells him that he wanted to visit a childhood friend, but Edmund denies everything. Edmund doesn't want to talk to him. Edmund is reminded of Elodie and Cinderella. Cesare says he must be punished for Wetson's actions. Edmund says there is no need for that. Cesare watches him closely. Cesare wants to see the girl everyone is crazy about, Cinderella. Cesare thinks that Edmund fell in love with her at first sight. We think so too. Cesare wants to apologize in person. Edmund still denies everything. Edmund says that no one has stayed in the house and he wants to throw the prince out. Cesare wants to ask something in return. Edmund promises that he will listen to him. Cesare wonders why Edmund didn't use cotton magic. Cesare receives the answer. There is no reason for that. Edmund, who has received magic and fencing, can upgrade if he uses a magic cotton. Edmund isn't interested in that. Edmund wants to achieve everything on his own. Edmund was lucky to be born an aristocrat and enjoy things. He doesn't want to fall into that habit and steal his chance. Cesare is trying to push him into doing the wrong thing. Edmund mentions the previous duke, whom he could have saved with magic. But our hero puts a stop to all this. Cesare apologizes for crossing the line. Edmund and Cesare decide to both calm down and go their separate ways. Cesare asks not to see him to the door. Edmund wonders what Cesare wanted. Edmund decided to keep an eye on Cesare and never take his eyes off him. Cesare stands in the corridor and thinks of new plots. One of the maids is worried that the prince is here alone without an escort. Cesare decides to take advantage of the situation and says that he is looking for someone. Cesare insists that the maid tell him where Cinderella is. Cesare walks through the castle corridors, bathed in the sunset. Cesare thinks he can catch Cinderella. He wonders why the heroine was seated in the main hall and whether the Valkyriesons really don't care about the guest. Cesare wants to seduce Cinderella to anger Edmund. Cesare encounters a magical clap on his way. Cesare decides to follow the magical cotton. Cesare remembers Edmund's words. Cesare wants to deceive Edmund and obtain the power of cotton. Cesare catches the magical cotton, and it is almost in his hands. Elodie runs down the hallway and plays with cotton. Elodie happily tells him that she was looking for cotton. Basically, 2 wolves are playing a game, a sweet girl and a prince, a hidden wolf. Elodie immediately understands the prince's cunning plan. Elodie decides to introduce herself to our villain. Cesare remembers everything that was said about Elodie. Cesare believes that the cotton belongs to him. He majestically allows Elodie to take the cotton. Cesare considers her an obstacle in his path. Cesare believes that the cotton is only his, not Elodie's. Cesare decides to absorb the power of the cotton. But the cotton crumbles in his hands, unable to withstand the prince's anger. Elodie knows the prince won't be able to swallow cotton. A man of the prince's level cannot swallow cotton. Elodie realizes that cotton disagrees with the prince. Cesare asks her directly how a small fry dares to anger him. Elodie is happy. Cesare shows his true face. Cesare threatens Elodie, calling her a petty piece of nastiness that has gotten in his way. He warns Elodie to get out of his way. But the sound of marching footsteps is heard along the corridor. A group of knights look menacingly at the prince. Elodie's loyal fan club is ready to protect her. The prince feels uneasy and tries to justify himself. The prince wearily asks to be taken to other chambers, admitting defeat. Golf calmly answers him that he did not notice him. The prince is shown that they have come for Elodie and that he means nothing to anyone. They all came for Elodie's child. The prince learns that Elodie is the daughter of a priest from the Ratson family. Golf begins to interrogate the prince about what he wanted to do. The prince tries to get out of the situation by saying that it was all an accident. Cesare believes that he will be in trouble if his actions are found out. Elodie accuses the prince of stealing cotton. Elodie informs on Golf that the prince stated that he said the cotton belonged to him. Golf Grono asks him if it is true and if there is an ominous aura around the prince. The prince is trying very hard to escape punishment. But all his words irritate Elodie, and she accuses him of lying. Elodie snitched that he wanted to offend her and steal the cotton. Elodie's loyal fan club is ready to protect the girl from the prince. The prince understands that he is about to be beaten. The prince tries to retreat away from the knights. The snake crawls into the bushes, away from the fight. Elodie is glad that the snake prince ran away with his tail between his legs. The knights thank Elodie and praise her for her bravery. The knights want to play with Elodie all day. Elodie disappoints them by saying that none of this will happen. Golf is forced to simply hug Elodie. The prince almost screwed up because of our rat. The prince is very annoyed by this annoying mouse. The prince realizes that he was deliberately provoked. Cesare is furious. His plans have been thwarted by the knights. The prince stops abruptly and his gaze turns to the estate. He suddenly thinks that everything is not so bad. Now he knows their secret about the Ratsons and the cotton. The prince decided to crush our heroine. Next time our mouse won't expect mercy from him. We are shown the Vakrisons' estate, illuminated by the sun's rays. Two knights fight desperately, and the sound of swords echoes throughout the castle. Two knights are about to clash in a fight to the death. Iggles believes the knights are making a rapid rise. Both knights became stronger after hugging Elodie. Elodie believes it's all the magic power of cotton. Elodie realizes that the power of her hugs helps. Iggles can barely contain himself. Elodie says that one of the knights recently said, "The Duke was informed that Elodie had gotten into trouble because of the prince." Cinderella is curious to know what happened. Elodie is scared by the gloomy atmosphere around them. Cinderella asks this because of her. Elodie wanted to keep her relationship with the prince a secret. Elodie somehow justifies herself to the heroes. Cinderella wants to say something, but then she becomes gloomy and falls silent. Cinderella apologizes for not being able to be a support for Elodie. Cinderella realizes her helplessness. Cinderella says she's sorry Elodie can't rely on her. Cinderella decides to become stronger. Sakura Haruno mode is activated. Elodie tries to dissuade Cinderella from her decisions. Elodie realizes that she failed to protect Cinderella. Elodie thinks that in such a body she can't win. Cinderella asked the prince to help homeless people. Cinderella asks to fulfill the princess's duty. But the prince says that without support and family she is nothing. The mouse remembers how Cinderella was told to mind her own business. Elodie believes that she didn't want a life of luxury. Cinderella needed protection, but that was not her true desire. In her past life, her path was blocked by a prince, and now by our mouse. If Cinderella wants to become strong, the mouse will support her. The mouse says that he will support Cinderella. The mouse asks how she can help Cinderella's personal growth. Elodie suggests talking to the parents so that Cinderella can be accepted into the Ratson household. But according to the laws of people, people and animals cannot coexist together. The Duke claims that everything is pointless and that Cinderella is unlikely to be accepted by the Ratsons. The Duke believes that the mouse needs protection. The Duke invites the mouse and Cinderella to live in his house as part of their family. Iggles claims the area is a nature reserve. In Animalolia, many beastmen are orphans, and only the strongest survive. Elodie thinks that avoiding the beastmen is bad. Iggles was one of the orphans who was taken in by the Duke. That's why this estate is a paradise for beastmen. The Duke believes that Cinderella will not be an extra child. Elodie realizes that she is safe thanks to the Duke, but Cinderella wants to give up the name Valkrisen. Cinderella asks to return her name and she will fully thank the magical family. Elodie tries to talk Cinderella out of it. But Cinderella smiles sweetly and wants to offer something. Even if she was humiliated in the Bluewood house, the foolish Cinderella wants to return there. Cinderella says she wants to fix everything. The Duke says he is glad and will accept any decision she makes. At the request of the Ratsons, he wanted to wipe Cinderella's family off the face of the earth. Cinderella remembers a strange sound coming from the Duke's earring. Cinderella is horrified that her family has been ordered to be killed. The old man says that the Rathos ordered the death of Cinderella's family. Cinderella thinks that Elodie is being lenient in vain. Elodie doesn't care what family Cinderella comes from. If Cinderella's line disappears, the Count will wait for his death. The Count may also commit suicide. It's better to give what's left last and wait. Cinderella will take away what she once considered family. The Duke agrees that he will support Cinderella. Edmund decides to accompany Cinderella. Cinderella will regain her good name. There is one law in the kingdom of Silveria. In the kingdom, children, regardless of gender, have the right to inheritance. The king accepted this law because he only had daughters. The rightful heir of the Bluewood family is Cinderella, not her sisters. The law gives priority only to direct descendants, so only Cinderella will be the heir of the Bluewoods. Duke Valkyrie told the mouse about this. Edmund promises that he will help Cinderella in any way he can. Elodie thinks the Duke is a good man. Elodie, according to Edmund, understands that the Duke is a strict but fair man. Suddenly, Elodie is hungry and her stomach is growling loudly. Elodie apologizes, but Cinderella says everything is fine. Elodie really wants to try the seeds Edmund gave to the mice. Edmund remembers feeding the mice sunflower seeds. Elodie asks Edmund to share his seeds. But Edmund has no seeds and Elodie is very upset. Edmund decides to tell the truth about the seeds. It turns out that Edmund was carrying the seeds because he was thinking about the missing Ratson. Edmund thought she was hungry and showed concern by bringing her some seeds. But now that Elodie has been found, there is no longer any need for seeds. Edmund offers her cookies with nuts instead of seeds. Elodie is stunned. Edmund seems like a dangerous man, but he is a good man. Elodie offers Cinderella a cookie, but she refuses. Cinderella reminds Edmund that using food to win over the Ratsons is wrong. Elodie looks at Cinderella and a gloomy silence falls. Edmund immediately justifies himself, but his plan is obvious. Elodie discovers Edmund's true identity. Eventually, they arrive at the Bluewood estate. Edmund says she can always count on him, but he's a real liar. Cinderella doesn't trust Edmund. To her, he is a child thief. Elodie wonders what made Sarah distrust Edmund. But Edmund decided to enter the estate first. But Edmund is ready to commit massacre with the Bluewood family's boats. Cinderella is shocked that her family is ready to welcome her. Cinderella's father decides to say something, but his way is blocked. The Count is told that she did not come to save them. Elodie thought Sarah seemed to hesitate. The Count tries to convince Cinderella to help him. The Count begs her to explain everything to Edmund and that he is very sorry. But Cinderella tells them everything she thinks about her family. But Cinderella, with a sinister smile, asks not to worry. Cinderella reminds him that she is his daughter and was not eliminated. The Count objects to her, but Cinderella doesn't want to listen to him. Cinderella says that she did not come to convince him. Cinderella declares war on her stepmother. Cinderella ominously tells them that she has learned that she is not on the Bluewoods list. Cinderella says she has not been included in the family register since childhood. She thinks that someone deliberately erased her name from the registry. The stepmother tries to apologize and denies her vile actions. Cinderella immediately demands that her name be included. The stepmother is ready to lick her feet to save her life. Cinderella's sister angrily asks what she will do if they refuse. But Cinderella's stepsister is ordered to remain silent. The stepmother apologizes for the bad manners of Cinderella's stepsister, Rose, in an attempt to smooth things over. Even earlier, strict requirements were imposed on Cinderella. Cinderella says the reason for returning is simple. Cinderella wants to reclaim the Bluewood name. Cinderella also wants to take her mother's relics. Cinderella haughtily says that she has no time for her stepmother. She walks past her spineless father. Cinderella was wrong to believe that her father would love her. Now Cinderella's father and family mean nothing to her. We are transported to the Bluewood Treasury, where there is a heap of rich jewelry. Cinderella sees that her stepmother hid Cinderella's mother's jewelry very well. The stepmother gives her everything she has from Cinderella's mother. There is some strange energy emanating from the treasury. Elodie's gaze is drawn to the necklace on display. The ruby necklace glowed brightly as Elodie looked at it. Elodie feels uneasy around him. Her head starts to split, and memories come flooding back. Elodie tries to suppress painful memories. Elodie and Edmund notice that Elodie is getting sick and surround her with care. Someone's powerful and mysterious voice announces that it blesses Ratson's birth. A certain Nyx basilisk swears allegiance to Elodie. We are shown Elodie's past. The basilisk drags a crying mouse through the forest. Basilisk tells the crying Elodie that she will cry her eyes out and that they have their whole lives ahead of them. If God is truly watching over Elodie, he will lend a helping hand. The mad magician casts a spell on Elodie and says that he believes that punishment awaits him if God exists. Elodie remembered everything, how she ended up with Cinderella and how she was enchanted. Edmund and Elodie are worried about Cinderella. Edmund decides to return to the estate using the familiar sphere. Elodie asks where her stepmother got the magic bracelet. Elodie wonders what kind of magic bracelet it is and what power it has. This bracelet belonged to the man who cursed Elodie. Now Elodie decides the following. She will find Nyx the basilisk. The bracelet was kept in Cinderella's treasury, but this is not a coincidence. Elodie asks her stepmother for answers to her questions. Was her stepmother really in cahoots with Basilisk? Edmund demands the truth from Cinderella's stepmother, and the negotiations will not be peaceful. The stepmother tells them that her necklace is a gift from Basilisk for ridding his house of rodents. The stepmother asks for mercy and says that everything is not like that at all. Elodie thinks that the stepmother was hardly only interested in the mice attack. Therefore, it is possible that the Countess's negligence saved her from death. Elodie demands that she be given the bracelet. Cinderella resorts to threats again to get the bracelet. The stepmother doesn't want any problems, so she gives away the bracelet. Elodie decides to find the magician and is grateful to Cinderella for this. Elodie used a magic brooch to travel back 13 years. Elodie decides not to let Basilisk win this war. A few days later at the Valkyrison mansion, Edmund explains that the ruby is extremely rare and is not for sale. Elodie learns that the basilisks are withdrawn and lead a very private life. But if the ruby is an ordinary stone, how did it manage to capture her memories? Perhaps the magic stone remembered her childhood self. Cinderella is grateful to Edmund for helping them more than once. It's hard for Edmund to even imagine what Cinderella and Elodie went through. Edmund promises the girls that they can always count on him. Cinderella and Elodie are happy that they can rely on him. But Elodie wants to confront Edmund. She will not allow him to start an affair with Cinderella. Elodie decides to ask Edmund about the basilisks. The members of the basilisk family use aliases and always wear cloaks, even in public. Elodie understands that information is scarce and things are not that simple. Edmund asks if the magic bracelet really belonged to Basilisk. Edmund decides that the Weissliski are behind the war in their kingdom. Elodie makes excuses. She doesn't want to involve anyone in her affairs. Edmund knows that the basilisks are very evil and greedy since they kidnapped Elodie. Elodie thinks they need the post of High Priest of the Ratsons. For Elodie, the basilisks will do anything to gain the position of priest. Nyx's face reminded Elodie of something. Charon Valkroisen is very similar to Nyx basilisk. The ominous feeling from Charon is painfully reminiscent of the basilisks. The Valkroisens take in orphans and care for them, probably Charon, a foundling of the basilisks. Apparently the basilisk is treated differently in this estate, but the children are kept locked away from their home. Perhaps Charon is not Valkroisen, but a basilisk. Could it be that the basilisks have planted their spy in this house? But if the Duke saved one of the basilisks, why is he keeping him locked up? Perhaps the old Duke is hiding many secrets. Elodie thinks that Edmund knows something about Karen. Elodie decides to find out about Charon from Edmund. According to Edmund, Karen's disease is highly contagious and he lives in a separate mansion. Elodie thinks that Karen's illness is an excuse and there is more to it. If Karen is one of the basilisks and is destined to die at an early age, then he must be saved. Elodie decides to meet Karen and save him in order to get closer to Nyx. Elodie asks where she can find Karen. Edmund tells her that Karen can be contacted using the artifact, but he does not respond at all. Elodie suggests that she can cure Karen. Edmund has a strange reaction, and Elodie tries to find out the reason. According to Edmund, even Elodie's father could not cope with this disease. According to Edmund, things are getting worse and worse. Edmund asks Elodie not to be upset. Edmund believes that Elodie will succeed and that she will be able to do the impossible. Elodie decides not only to cure Karen, but first to befriend him. But there is a problem. It is unlikely that Karen will be happy and trust her. The action moves to the Bluewood Estate Library. Cinderella makes Elodie happy that she is now a full member of the Bluewood family. From today on, Cinderella will be preparing for her role as heir to the family. Cinderella decides to work hard to become a real aristocrat. Cinderella decides that she will be the best. Elodie is horrified by Cinderella's schedule. It's all jam-packed with lessons. Cinderella is far behind other aristocrats and needs to learn. Elodie thinks that Cinderella is overdoing it with her homework. She expresses concern for Cinderella so that she gets up at 8 o'clock and sleeps peacefully. But Cinderella wastes her chance to sleep well, eat and live on some lessons. Elodie decides to support Cinderella and prepare with her. We are shown that Cinderella is working hard, but Elodie has already fallen asleep. She is bored with all this. Elodie wakes up with a start, and Cinderella greets her with a waking smile. Elodie doesn't give up. She decides to get to know Karen properly. Elodie apologizes to Cinderella and decides to go for a walk. Cinderella tells her that hugging the Ratsons is a pleasure because they exude such calm. Elodie thinks that calmness is her strength, which was enhanced by the cotton. Elodie decides that she is bothering Cinderella and wants to go for a walk. Elodie runs away and leaves Cinderella to continue cramming. Cinderella has no idea where the mouse gets such energy from. Elodie walks through the dark forest, making her way through the dense undergrowth. In front of her is a gloomy mansion where Karen is kept. There are no dried-up bushes, no birds singing, nothing. The castle itself resembles a Russian church in its structure. Elodie realizes that Karen's illness is not simple. But inside there is no smell of disease, rather it smells like poison. Elodie is surprised. Does no one know about the ominous miasma emanating from the depths of the castle? I wonder if the Duke and Edmund know about the poisonous fumes. The castle seems to be spreading a terrible plague. But Elodie hears something and she decides to check. Elodie clearly hears that the sound is coming from above the estate. But the door to the estate is closed. How will our heroine get inside? Elodie feels like a prince saving a beautiful princess. Inside the mysterious estate, it is dark, like in a horror story about a black castle and a black room. This house, in Elodie's opinion, screams that no one is welcome here. Elodie doesn't have the best memories. She is haunted by a suffocating silence and a feeling of loneliness. Darkness is the best place to hide from problems. But sometimes hiding is not the solution to life's problems. Elodie opens the curtains and asks if Karen is okay. Karen's red eyes slowly open and stare at her unblinkingly. Karen himself is battered. He is very pale and dirty. Karen squints at the bright light, not expecting to see Ratson. Elodie didn't even know that the boy was so ill. Elodie looks at Karen and realizes there is nothing she can do. Elodie decides that her embrace can heal Karen. But she decides to start not with hugs, but simply with touching hands. Karen looks very surprised and scared. No one has touched him before. Elodie asks how the boy is feeling, but we remember that Karen kills everyone with his touches, and he sharply recoiled from Elodie. Elodie stumbles, the floor beneath her feet creaking ominously. Young Valkrisen reminds her that it is dangerous here and that Elodie should leave. After this, Karen passes out right in Elodie's arms. But Karen seems more relaxed than before. Elodie shows concern for Karen. This is the first time the cursed boy has slept peacefully. Elodie says goodnight to the child and leaves him to sleep. Elodie comes outside, all red and covered in gloom. Elodie pays no attention to the threatening nature. She walks through the gloomy forest, unaware of the danger. Elodie thinks Karen didn't want her to reveal his basilisk nature, these scales covering his skin and the blackness at the corners of his mouth. There is no doubt that Charon is a basilisk, and a young one at that, and a black mamba-type snake. Due to some illness, he cannot control his poison. Elodie is still reeling from the vision of Karen. Elodie believes that there will be more poison in the near future. There were rumors that this was the work of one person who killed people and animals indiscriminately and spread the infection. But when people touched it and decided to cure this disease, it became worse. Everything living died in the hands of those who touched it. These rumors may be true if Karen is alive. The description Elodie read in the newspaper sounds very similar to what's happening in Serenity's mansion. And Karen died a few years after this incident. Perhaps he was a criminal. Either he couldn't control his toxicity or he committed suicide. For Elodie, it doesn't matter what's true. Perhaps it will be possible to convince Karen not to go over to Nyx's side. But if he met Nyx, then perhaps he should be considered an enemy. Charon slowly wakes up. Elodie is not there. Charon claims to feel much better. Charon suddenly gets up from his bed and walks unsteadily down the corridor. Charon notices someone's button next to the bed. Probably Elodie forgot it. Charon realizes that Elodie came to see him. Ratson actually held his hand. Without gloves, without protection, in a castle surrounded by miasma, what was she even thinking about? It dawns on Karen that she wanted to help him. Karen is afraid that he has hurt her. He worries that he killed a girl, so fragile and defenseless, who wanted to help him. But logically, at least the body should have remained. Charon believes that the Ratsons are more resilient, but will not last long. Charon wants to bury Elodie, not knowing that she is alive. All of Elodie's plans failed, and she was unable to achieve anything. Elodie regrets that she was in such a hurry. Will Elodie be able to cure Karen? Elodie is worried that she won't be able to prevent everything. Elodie thinks she needs to tell her grandfather everything. Elodie understands that the only solution is to tell the Duke everything. But she also decides to use Melnir's hammer to prevent everything. Elodie decided that she would take the hammer to her next meeting with Karen. Dad told her to use it for special occasions, but now is just such an occasion. Elodie decides to learn how to use a hammer. She hammers on the surface just as she was told. Elodie slammed the hammer down on the surface with all her might. But it turns out that something is not quite right with her. Elodie is upset. She made a hole in the floor. Elodie is in a panic. Did she really do this? How can she fix it now? But Elodie is curious about what's in the other room, and she looks through the hole. The room itself is small and does not look like a duke's room. Elodie climbs into the hole, turning into a mouse. But the hole behind her began to shrink, and now she couldn't get out. Elodie doesn't know how to get out of the room now. The hammer takes the main character to some mysterious library where everything is blue. She looks at the books here with interest. The authors of all the books are the Ratsons. They are the previous heads of the family. The first head of the Ratsons, Raphael, wrote the book Resurrection and Rebirth Granted to Life. Elodie is happy. It turns out that the Ratsons have an unusual power. Elodie decides to read Raphael's book in one go. But the book doesn't want to open under her tiny paws. There are also books here, Cleansing for Dummies, If It Hurts, It's Poisonous, and hey, you can spot poisons too. Elodie is upset. None of these books of Raphael open. Elodie is upset. She can't read any of it. Elodie suddenly freezes. Perhaps she found something to read. Elodie finds the 23rd chapter of Maximilian, her father's book. The books describe the anatomy of beastmen and the basics of herbalism. All the books are intended for children, and it is clear that Elodie's father expected his daughter to read them all. Elodie is worried that the books won't open, but the book, as soon as Elodie took it in her paws, immediately opened. This book is dedicated to Elodie. Her father believed that she would one day return home. This book opened because it was meant for Elodie. Elodie realizes that her parents have been waiting for her for a very long time. In this life, she returned to her parents, but in the past, they only had to wait for her. Elodie wonders what feelings her father had when he wrote. In front of her is a page about an ointment that heals all wounds. But Elodie sees all these ingredients for the first time. Elodie is looking for ingredients for the ointment. Elodie decides to mix everything in this room. But a bright light appears in front of Elodie. "Calcifer, is that you?" Calcifer appears to have escaped from Howl's castle. Calcifer claims that he ate all the ointment and that it didn't turn out well for Elodie. Elodie wonders how the fire spirit knows this. This light is Inferno, the spirit of fire, who lives in the temple and knows everything by heart. Elodie decides to take the chance and find out the contents of the books that have not been opened. Elodie offers him to help her, but he asks her to go back 10 years earlier, and then he will help. Elodie is upset. Can't Inferno do anything? Inferno thinks that the fairy Maxie shouldn't have told her about the spell. The mouse explains to him that things will still be bad, and she cannot prevent Cinderella's death. Inferno tells her that they are in the Temple of Eternity, which belongs to House Ratson. Unfortunately, the library will pass to another clan, and the basilisks will win. Elodie is against this decision. All the books were written by her family. Inferno reproaches her for having to deal with a bunch of priests. Inferno has been here since the first book was set, and he believes that the Ratsons have no future. He helps Elodie find her way and not stay stuck in one place. Elodie asks him a question. Does Inferno really care about everything, and does he want to live his life in the library, not giving a damn about the Ratsons? Inferno remembers all the priests, from the first, Raphael, to the 23rd, Maximilian. Inferno couldn't even imagine that everything in the library would change. Inferno is just a ball that is tied to this place. The rat is indignant. Its kind will disappear. Something must be done. The mouse is upset when she is asked to run away when her family is in danger instead of fighting. She decided to study all the books that were here. Inferno is surprised. Does the heroine really want to learn everything in a few years? She is confident that she will succeed. Elodie doesn't want to give in to the Vaislisks. They can heal without armor, and she can do the same. Elodie wants to try everything in life and test. Maybe she will be able to defeat the basilisks. If Inferno isn't going to help, then let him just watch. Inferno is captivated by her determination to move on. He offers the heroine a deal, she finishes the book in a month, and he will tell her about the other books. Inferno is amazed that the heroine wants to master other books. Our heroine agrees to Inferno's business proposal. The mouse enthusiastically decides to master the books in half a month. The mouse is horrified. How could she promise Inferno such a thing? But our heroine is very tired. The book is floating before her eyes. She is sad. Instead of entertainment, mortal boredom awaits her, cramming. Elodie decides to unwind, but thoughts of cramming take all her strength. Magic cotton, fireflies surround her and stick to her. Elodie is indignant. She is tired of the cotton, like fluff, coming out from everywhere. For her, cotton is a clot of magical energy, but it behaves too intelligently. Elodie spots Iggles walking alone in the park. Iggles is glad that Elodie got along with Cotton. Iggles is surprised by her words that Cotton has a mind of its own. In fact, it is possible, a magical clap, mana, living energy, straight out of the livestream from Final Fantasy VII. Elodie is amazed. Iggles can imbue magical Cotton with life. But Elodie has stronger powers. She can resurrect the dead. Iggles corrects himself. He said a lot of things about resurrecting the dead. The heroine decides that she will study the books about resurrection as soon as she finishes with the book. Elodie thinks that if she can get along with the Cotton, she will move forward with her goal of saving Cinderella. The heroine hears something in the grass. Black, smooth scales flash there. In front of her is a charming black snake with red eyes. Iggles is immediately frightened and warns Elodie that the snake is poisonous and dangerous. Elodie remembers that she has seen this snake before. Elodie fearlessly walks towards the snake. Iggles tries to stop her. Still, this snake is Charon. His red eyes give him away. She decides to say hello to Karen, despite Iggles' fear. Iggles is horrified. Has Elodie really gone mad while talking to a snake? Elodie picks up the snake and decides to heal it, as the snake is harmless. Iggles is very worried about Elodie. The snake might bite. In his snake form, Karen looks cuter and more harmless. The basilisk's head is round, its scales are smooth, and its eyes are so inviting. The girl denies everything. How can she be imbued with basilisk, the enemy of her family? Iggles is surprised. Why is the snake, which is poisonous, like a rune? Here, Elodie notices that the snake is wounded. A pink scratch is growing down to the flesh. It turns out that our Karen fell and was badly injured in the bushes. Elodie remembers that she has a cure. She has a healing ointment that she has been working on for a very long time. Elodie tells Iggles that her father gave her the ointment. Despite the snake's dislike, Elodie applies the ointment. Charon's wound instantly heals and no trace remains. Elodie realizes what it means to be Ratson. Charon crawls away from her as far as possible. He feels uncomfortable here. The little snake slowly crawls away to its gloomy castle. Elodie thinks the snake has returned to its owner. Elodie's words about the offered help are not empty words for Karen. Charon crawls away and turns into a man. Sharon is glad that Elodie is okay. But then Karen never showed up again, and Elodie studied and also communicated with Cinderella. So 2 weeks passed and Elodie wakes up one morning. Her maid, a squirrel, is worried about her. Elodie managed to get through the herbalism book, but she was exhausted. Elodie is completely exhausted. The maid suggests that Elodie talk to the doctor. Dr. Pecker was the Valkyriesons' attending physician. He even treated Liana, the mother of the Duke's grandchildren. She died when the Duke was young and he became the head of the house. Elodie learns that Edmund previously suffered from insomnia and was treated by Dr. Pecker. Edmund sleeps thanks to the healer's magical therapy. Elodie is curious about what kind of therapy the doctor uses. Elodie finds everything strange about the doctor's story. The Svicarel is abruptly summoned by the Duke. The maid promises that she will be back in 5 minutes. Suddenly, someone rudely insults the girl. Elodie is terrified. She is frightened by the sudden stranger. The stranger tells her to get up quickly. Elodie is surprised. Who would wake her up so rudely? But the hair and eye colour is similar to Edmund's. Could this really be the second master, Zenobia Valkyriesson? Zenobia is the second duke who received hatred from those around him due to his bitchy nature. The mouse was convinced of this because she saw the scandal in Silveria. Zenobia was outraged by the quality of the alcohol and started a scandal in the estate. He asks in a menacing and drunken voice what the waiter is unhappy about. The guests are whispering among themselves, who even invited Zenobia here, who is making scandals out of nothing. They say that Zenobia showed promise, but then he changed and became nasty. He looks at the mouse and is outraged by what it is doing. Elodie had always wondered what made a talented swordsman a failure. Zenobia very rudely asks why she's lying around here. But Elodie was too tired to listen to Zenobia. Elodie has it very hard. Human superiority is simply evident. Where did Zenobia get such nasty manners? Eodie gets tired of his antics and asks him outright where such hatred for the beastman comes from. But Zenobia hates rats, and Elodie is interested to know why. According to Zenobia, rats are dirty and smelly and don't mind mice. Elodie Zenobia is disgusting to look at. After all, she is a beastman. Zenobia asks her why she doesn't agree with him. Elodie reminds him that the Valkyriesons are the guardians of the worlds between animals and humans, and that animals also have a right to life. Elodie suggests that Zenobia should just leave if he doesn't like her. Zenobia is ready to fight her to the death, but the Duke appears and stops Zenobia. The Duke is furious. How dare Zenobia offend Elodie? Elodie understands that now someone is going to get it. The maid told the Duke about Zenovia's behaviour. Zenobia decides to justify her antics to her overbearing grandfather. The Duke demands to know why he distracted Squirrel and met with the heroine. Zenobia tells her grandfather everything. Zenobia thinks that her grandfather doesn't care about him and doesn't know anything about him. The Duke believes that Zenobia needs to be re-educated. Elodie thinks about the young Duke's remark. The Duke is curious about what he said to Elodie. The Duke asks to tell everything and wants to punish Zenobia. The girl is afraid that she will tell and Zenobia will get into trouble. Elodie wonders what the child meant. Elodie is confident that if she talks to Zenobia, everything will come to its senses. Elodie decides to give him a real dressing down. Zenobia sits and eats lobsters with a bump on her head. Elodie asks why he was beaten, but he rudely denies everything. Elodie was given a magic sphere, saying that if Zenobia gets too cocky, the magic sphere will help summon Edmund. Zenobia doesn't want to apologize to the heroine. Zenobia remembers how strict Edmund was with him, forcing him to eat with Elodie. Elodie says she will eat pecan pie. He offers her something more delicious, lobster with caviar. They start arguing about which is tastier, the pie or the lobster, but we quietly whisper, "Wrap us up both." Zenobia rudely accuses the heroine of having bad taste and that his cooking is tastier. He wants to feed Elodie lobster, but she is afraid, even forgetting that she is omnivorous. Elodie is having food forced into her mouth. Elodie is scared. She doesn't know what he gave her. Elodie realizes she's been given something tasty. Zenobia continues to feed her lobster. Zenobia demands that she admit that his food is tastier. Zenobia then wonders what he's even doing. Overall, Zenobia is a typical teenager. Elodie remembers how she was treated in her past life. Elodie believes that Zenobia is not a villain and asks why her grandfather does not admit it. Zenobia really wants to yell at her grandfather so that he can hear her. Zenobia tells the heroine that her grandfather doesn't even remember him. He claims that he is not worth remembering. The Duke wants to speak with Zenobia. Zenobia looks at her grandfather. He turns around, getting ready to talk to him. Grandpa calls him Ed and wants to talk about something. Then it dawns on the old Duke that he is facing his second grandson. As soon as he realized that it was his second brother in front of him, he immediately became disappointed. Zenobia remembered this tragedy and cannot forgive his grandfather. Elodie tries to convince Zenobia not to think that way. Zenobia considers herself a bronze medalist. According to the rules, a bronze medal is third place. Even when Zenobia won the gold medal, Zenobia was always last in grandfather's mind. The Duke preferred his younger brother and elder Zenobia. He always overlooked Zenobia's contributions to society. Zenobia became jealous of our heroine because her grandfather began to consider her his granddaughter. Zenobia doesn't want to be the fourth in this terrible relationship. Elodie realizes why Zenobia called her a nasty rat, but the Duke hardly cares so much about his own grandson. Elodie decides to console Zenobia by saying that it's not true. Elodie reminds him that the Duke is his grandfather and he cares about his grandson. Zenobia is furious. How can this rat understand anything? Elodie decides that Zenobia has made things up. Grandpa wouldn't judge by ability. He loves Zenobia. Elodie suggests that he go and ask his grandfather directly. A shadow of doubt crossed Zenobia's face. Zenobia's lips are trembling. He's about to cry. But Zenobia decides to go with the heroine to her grandfather. Elodie meets Iggles on her way to her grandfather's. Iggles is glad that Zenobia and the mouse have become friends. Iggles sees how tightly they hold hands. For him, this is a guarantee of friendship. Zenobia doesn't like the mouse's proximity, and Elodie is enthusiastic about finding the Duke. Elodie learns that an important guest has come to see the Duke. A certain blonde man speaks happily to the Duke. Elodie is curious who this tall and handsome blonde man is. Iggles reveals that this is Cassian, the Duke's missing nephew. Only the Duke knows his face, as he was a baby when Cassian disappeared. Cassian explains how much he missed him, and understands why the Duke doesn't remember him. The Duke assumes that the person in front of him is his real nephew. Cassian says that he was raised by serfs, and that he himself remembered nothing. The Duke refuses to acknowledge Cassian. He does not believe him. Cassian decides to show the Duke something to prove that he is his nephew and not a fraud. Cassian has a portrait of his parents, a portrait that he carried with him throughout his life. Cassian reminds that he kept this medallion all his life and he received it from his father. At the last moment of the fight with the enemy, Cassian's father shouted something to him. Cassian's father gave orders for the heir to survive at any cost. Cassian's father also ordered him to find the Duke. Cassian says that he wanted to see the Duke again and understands if he doesn't recognize him. The Duke asks him about his memory in a sharp tone. He asks Cassian to tell him about his childhood. Cassian remembers being called Shorty as a child, and Cassian was scolded for not eating corn. The Duke says that they need to go to his room and talk. The Duke hints to him that he looked into his eyes during the conversation. The Duke had been grumbling at Cassian for this bad habit since childhood. Cassian is happy, but our heroes are not. Elodie thinks they are facing an imposter. Elodie thinks that they are trying to deceive the good Duke. Both Zenobia and Elodie decide to stop the Duke's deception. Zenobia suggests that Elodie turn into a mouse and follow the Duke. Elodie teases Zenobia that he now likes mice. Zenobia realized that he had offended Elodie and apologized. Elodie thinks she'll be found out because the castle is full of ears and eyes. Many beastmen were able to keep an eye on the Duke's nephew as soon as he entered their house. Elodie feels like she's not the first one curious about the truth about the Duke. Cassian is either a fraud or a real nephew. Now all hope is that the Duke himself will understand the deception. Inferno evaluates the mouse's abilities and her desire for knowledge and decides to help her with books. Elodie is haunted by the situation with the Duke and his nephew. Inferno wonders if the mouse has changed its mind. Elodie shocks Inferno by asking about the face-distinguishing spell. Inferno disappoints her. Such a spell does not exist. Inferno decides to look for the answer in books, but he finds nothing. He claims that the main thing is the desires of the bewitched person. People with a disorder and reluctance to recognize faces do not believe that this is possible at all. But such a disease can be cured. The mouse needs to figure out what's going on with his grandfather. We are shown the Valkyrieson's lunar palace. Cassian is accepted into this house and even given a separate room. The Duke suspects that the young man is not who they say he is. The Duke rummages through his documents. He takes out a portrait of himself as a young man and his father Cassian. He remembers his brother's request to take care of his wife and children. For Father Cassian, anything can happen in life. War broke out between his brother's lands and their neighbors. When the Duke arrived, the city was reduced to ashes. If he had known that this was his last meeting with Cassian's father, he would not have ignored his request. The Duke cannot be sure that it is the surviving Cassian who stands before him. The Duke decides to help the young man in any way he can to atone for his guilt before his dead brother. The Duke hears someone's ringing voice. The Duke admits Elodie into his chambers. Elodie wonders where young Cassian went. Elodie says that Zenobia wanted to talk to the Duke. The Duke insists that Zenobia himself should come, not her. Zenobia decided to keep an eye on the Duke and Cassian. The Duke abruptly stops writing when Elodie brings up Zenobia. The Duke became curious about what Elodie and Zenobia thought about Cassian. The Duke admits to having trouble recognizing facial differences. Elodie begins to question him about how long ago he stopped distinguishing between people. The Duke admits that it was not always like this. In his youth, the Duke lived only for war, but one day the Duke's life changed dramatically. But the Duke could not tell on the battlefield who was addressing him, a friend or an enemy who was calling him young master. This man was simply killed in cold blood on the spot. The Duke blamed himself for what happened all his life. The Duke witnessed the bloody massacre. The Duke was almost killed on the battlefield. After that massacre, the Duke felt like he had an unhealed scar on his soul, and the memories of that day were like poison to the Duke. The Duke eventually stops recognizing everyone. His daughter appears and gives birth to a second grandson. The child has his mother's eyes, and they want to name him after his mother. The baby was named Zenobia. The Duke decides that from now on he will protect the baby whose face he cannot distinguish. The Duke blames himself for not being able to recognize faces. The Duke tells the heroine everything that happened. The Duke asks Elodie not to worry and decides to talk to Zenobia. Elodie decides to help the Duke with his illness. The Duke, however, claims that he himself is to blame for his illness. Elodie decides to cure the Duke anyway. People who suffer from old wounds always behave this way themselves. Elodie admits that she wants the Duke to live a very long time. She asks the Duke to be honest with Zenobia. Elodie admits that she will be sad if he dies. God forbid, of course. Even the Duke's memories are gradually fading. Elodie knows how painful it is to close yourself off from everyone and accept loss. But she found the strength to live on. The mouse devoted her whole life to it, without thinking about the future. Elodie promises that she will cure the Duke. The Duke is humbled by the fact that she cares for him so much. Knowing Zenovia's past, the Duke still wants to see his grandson's face. The Duke decides not to hurt the children. Aren't children the most precious thing his daughter left him? Elodie offers her grandfather to drink her medicine. The Duke decides to test the medicine that Elodie gives him. The Duke instantly drains the vial of purple liquid. The Duke believes that he will be able to see human faces. But Elodie is in for a complete disappointment. The Duke is no better. Elodie suddenly realizes that she has mixed up the medications. Elodie asks the Duke, since he is confused, if he is ready to fix everything. Elodie believes that the Duke's desire to see his grandchildren is sincere. Elodie asks how he likes the potion. She asks if the Duke can see her face. The Duke is amazed, his illness is cured. The Duke says that for Ratson, it's Ratson. Elodie suggests taking a closer look. She hands him the portrait and invites him to examine his brother's face. The Duke now sees everything very clearly. The photo shows the only brother who was different from him, and the nephew is an exact copy of his brother. The Duke realizes that he has been deceived. Meanwhile, the scammer is happy that everything went smoothly. The boy is glad that he managed to fool the Duke. The thief remembers his past. He walked down the street and wanted to change his destiny. The boy wanted to get something more. A homeless man who was begging for alms saw him. It was this homeless man who saw the young Cassian in the young man. The man turned out to be Cassian's old servant, who survived the massacre in the village. Cassian learned from him that no one survived. The young man decides to use his resemblance to the dead boy for evil purposes. Cassian was told that the Duke was ill and could not distinguish faces. The swindler decided to be nice to the old man, but the thought that he looks like a dead nobleman haunts him. The boy decided to pretend to be the real Cassian and asked the old man about the dead gentleman. The swindler took care of the old man and found out about Cassian. The old man told him everything she knew about Cassian, but then the old man died and the swindler decided to act. The con man was seduced by the idea that he would become rich by playing the role of Cassian. The swindler hears the Duke approaching his room. The scammer decides to continue playing his role. But the Duke and Elodie don't trust the swindler. He's been exposed. The Duke introduces him to his attending physician, Elodie, and wants to ask a couple of questions. Elodie immediately says that he is a scammer. The boy tries to lighten the mood. The con man plays the role of Cassian again. Elodie shows him a book of faces and says that there is no such face among the Valkyriesen family. The swindler feels uneasy and opens the portrait. The fraudster doesn't have a face, but a stamped face. The scammer tries to justify himself by posing as Cassian. Elodie understands that it is very difficult to spot a scammer. She offers him something to drink. The potion she gives him is truth serum. The swindler clearly feels uneasy. He doesn't want to drink the potion. The Duke offers the young man that if he drinks the potion and proves that he is his nephew, his lands will be returned to him. According to the Duke, Elodie is destined for the position of Supreme Minister. Not drinking the potion of God's messenger is a great insult. But the young man is afraid. His deception is about to be exposed. He realizes that something is wrong with the old man's memory. The Duke is curious why he hesitates. He understands that the young man is simply afraid to confess. The Duke insists that he drink the potion. The fraudster is scared. Now his scam is about to end. The boy tips over the bottle and the red liquid slowly flows out of it. The scammer tries to justify himself by saying that his hand twitched. He believes that it is difficult to recreate the truth serum for the Ratsons. But Elodie took precautions and created a backup serum. The Duke sternly warns him that if he wants, he doesn't have to drink. The swindler feels uneasy. The Duke is up to something bad. Suddenly, the Duke's hand suddenly grabs the swindler by the throat. The Duke mentions that he seemed to have become a different person. Then the Duke wonders if Elodie made the truth serum. Elodie passed off a typical euphoria-inducing drug as truth serum. Elodie believes the medicine worked on her grandfather. So the grandfather really wanted to see his grandchildren. Deep down, the Duke regretted not having seen his grandchildren. The cycle of his suffering repeated itself. He was tormented by a sense of guilt towards his grandchildren. Elodie wants her grandfather to be happy. Grandfather believes that he still has some way to go to achieve happiness. Grandfather wants the swindler and the one who deceived him to pay in full. Elodie wonders how Iggles could have been deceived. The Duke decides to torture his nephew. Grandpa also has problems that he decides to solve. Elodie decides to see what he's doing. The servants are horrified. A swindler is in the house. Zenobia is outraged that a swindler ended up in his house. Zenobia wants to kill the swindler, but suddenly Zenobia stops. Zenobia doesn't know if his grandfather will be pleased with him. But Zenobia knows nothing else but how to fight. If these were his grandchildren, they would console their grandfather. Elodie bursts into Zenovia's chambers with new news. Elodie wonders what happened to Zenobia. Elodie asks him what happened. She finds some notes. It's her grandfather's diary. Elodie and Zenobia decide to read the diary. Elodie invites him to read the diary. The Duke started keeping a diary because he couldn't see faces. A telegram arrived from the Emperor, who could not forget the Duke's daughter. But the Emperor doesn't know that he has sons. Elodie suddenly finds some recording. The new recording shows what interests Zenobia. The Duke cannot see Zenovia's face, but he believes that she is a strong child. The Duke takes the child in his arms and believes that he looks like the Emperor. Zenobia took up the sword. The Duke was glad of his success. The Duke wanted Zenobia to be free of scars like he and Edmund. The Duke has a scar from the war that prevents him from recognizing faces. Zenobia realizes that the Duke didn't really like his swordsmanship. Elodie, however, thinks the opposite. The Duke takes care of him and forbade him to fence so that Zenobia wouldn't get hurt. Elodie believes that the Duke is proud of Zen's successes. Zenobia is shocked. The Duke loves him in his own way. Suddenly, Zenobia notices something. The Duke was worried that Zenobia was always sweaty and dirty after training. Zenobia always looked so disheveled. That's why the Duke could always tell Zenobia from Edmund. Zenobia imitated Edmund in everything. His hairstyle, his face. The Duke meets Edmund. But the Duke cannot see Zenovia's face, and everything has lost its meaning for him. His face, his hairstyle, his smell. The Duke blames himself for not being able to see his grandchildren. The Duke wants the day to come when he will be able to weave his grandchildren's faces. Elodie slyly tells Zenobia that he is not in third place. Zenobia realizes that he was a real fool. The Duke says everything is fine. Zenobia is amazed. The Duke always noticed him. The Duke looks at Zenobia with a commanding gaze, but we now know that he is not insensitive. We are shown the Duke's mansion again. Zenobia asks Elodie if she will eat walnuts again. Elodie is tired of Zenovia's company. He doesn't give her any peace. Elodie wonders if Zenobia wants some pie. Elodie invites him to go with her. It seems our Zenobia has fallen under Elodie's spell. Zenobia agrees with Elodie and goes with him. Zenobia looks a lot like a puppy. Elodie notices something she didn't see. The servants argue about his lordship's hair. They think that he dyed his hair and new hair has grown. According to the servants, the Duke seemed to have grown younger. The servants start to fight because they are not trusted. Elodie is shocked. Has the Duke really become young? Elodie and Zenobia decide to see for themselves. They both burst into Grandpa's office. The Duke has fallen under the influence of the drug. His eyes hurt and he cannot wear glasses. Elodie is surprised. Isn't the Duke happy that he cured the disease? Elodie believes she can't turn back time. The Duke is glad that Elodie has gotten used to him. Elodie sees that the Duke has black hair. Zenobia is surprised, but the Duke is as unperturbed as usual. Zenobia wondered if the Duke's hair was grey. The Duke is curious why Zenobia is spending time with Elodie. The Duke scolds Zenobia for the fact that his grades have dropped because of Elodie. The Duke asks how Zenobia can even hate studying. Elodie is surprised why the old Duke suddenly shows concern for Zenobia. Elodie wonders why the Duke was so worried about everything. She decides to check on Edmund. Zenobia walks through the dark corridors. He thinks she's having a snack somewhere. Someone comes up to him and calls him by name. Before us is Advisor Pekar, the attending physician. The doctor is interested in Zenovia's health. Zenobia doesn't want to take her medicine anymore. Pekar is worried. Where has the reason for Prince Zenovia's concern disappeared to? Zenobia happily tells him about Elodie. Everything is not going according to Baker's plan. No one is taking his medication. Pekar disappoints Zenobia by saying that there is no such medicine for the mind. Zenobia tells Baker that his brother often hits him on the head. It's bad for Baker that everyone has gotten close to Ratson. Is it true that Elodie healed the Duke? If this continues, everything will go to Elodie. Pekar decides to prevent Elodie's growing influence. He gives Zenobia some mood-lifting medicine. Pekar believes that he can still manipulate Edmund. Meanwhile, Edmund stands alone in the chambers. Edmund is a sight to behold. Baker's medicine is so strong that the young man is unable to get enough sleep. Edmund decides to pull himself together. Edmund wants one thing, for the day to be as bright as today. Zenobia was a big prankster before than he is now. Edmund notices Charon timidly hiding behind the trees. He offers to help Karen in any way he can, but Karen is afraid of Edmund, which comes as a shock to him. Edmund was worried about some difficulties. In one day, he lost both his parents. Edmund's hands are stained with blood, and he himself is terrified. The nightmares that began that day haunt him. Edmund hears someone's voice calling him. Elodie is worried about Edmund. He doesn't look his best. Edmund tries to deny everything, but Elodie feels that something is wrong. Edmund tells her about Pekar's medicines. Suddenly, Zenobia finds them. Zenobia begins to accuse our Elodie of killing her parents. Edmund tries to find out from his brother what is going on. Zenobia finds everything suspicious, and that Elodie is smart and cured his grandfather. Elodie tries to figure out what's going on. Edmund decides to talk to Zenobia, but Zenobia doesn't want to listen to her brother. Zenobia screams that their parents were killed by beastmen. Edmund is surprised. He didn't know such details about his parents. Zenobia is rude to Edmund and says that he is a blockhead. Zenobia believes that Elodie wants to take over their house. Edmund asks Zenobia not to threaten Elodie. She is still a child. Edmund doesn't even want to listen to Zenobia. He asks Zenobia, who put this idea into his head. Elodie wants to resolve the conflict peacefully, but Zenobia refuses. Zenobia decides to find out everything and attacks Elodie. Edmund tries to stop the enraged Zenobia. Zenobia believes that all of this is a planned action. Edmund tells Zenobia that the death of his family is his fault. Elodie and Zenobia want to know the truth. Edmund calmly tells Zenobia that this is all his fault. The Duke calls Zenobia for a serious talk. The Duke doesn't trust Zenobia either. Elodie thinks something is wrong with Zenobia. The Duke orders Eagles to remove Elodie from the office. Zenobia wants to know the truth. The Duke believes that Zenobia has crossed the line and should be exiled. The Duke reminds that if he did not do it of his own free will, then there is no point in killing him. The meaning of the Duke's words dawns on Zenobia. Zenobia wonders why he did that at all. Elodie stands up for Zenobia and denies his threats. Elodie thinks something is wrong here. Elodie thinks that Zenobia was under an evil spell. Zenobia feels sick with remorse. The Duke looks at him long and hard. Zenobia and Elodie make peace and will no longer fight. Elodie asks Zenobia to tell him what he remembers. Elodie tries to remember Zenovia's unpredictable behavior. Zenobia tries to remember what he did. He remembers lunch and that Elodie left, but she denies everything. Zenobia recounts her conversation with Pekar about the medicine. Elodie asks him about the medicine. Zenobia tells her about the medicine in detail. Elodie thinks the problem is with the medication. But what is this mysterious medicine? This medicine is pure brainwashing. Elodie thinks that the healer is behind everything. Edmund also said strange things. If Pekar uses the medicine, then he decided to get close to Edmund. Edmund is also in trouble, and Elodie learns about a new cure. We are once again transported to a magical library full of secrets. Inferno is curious what the mouse wants from him this time. Elodie brought the medicine that was prescribed for Zenobia. Inferno decides to take the medicine. Elodie suspects that the medicine is some kind of drug. The medicine contains some nasty stuff. Elodie wonders if the Lord God in Animanolia isn't Fenris. This medicine contains the power of one who is not an emperor. Inferno says the medicine contains brainwashing. This medicine can be used to manipulate people. The mouse is horrified. Who could have made such a thing? Packer is the doctor who killed the previous Valkersons. Suspicion fell on him at the beginning of the trial, but then disappeared. The press later hushed up the matter. Elodie believes that Edmund is being treated by his parents' killer. Elodie decides to stop the killer. Elodie will rush to help Edmund and Zenobia. The palace is enveloped in night. Edmund sleeps restlessly in his bed. Edmund dreams of his mother. She reproaches Edmund for only learning. Edmund takes his role as the future head of the Valkyriesen house seriously. But his mother confiscates his books. She thinks that her son needs to rest. She says that children learn for themselves because one day loved ones may disappear. Edmund thinks his mother is very strange. Edmund's mother apologizes for her behavior. She says she's worried about Ed, but suddenly the carriage stops abruptly. The sounds of beastmen fighting. Edmund's mother is ready to fight. She asks her son to stay in the carriage and promises that she will return soon. She says that it is an adult's duty to protect children. Edmund is left alone with a bad feeling. His parents go off to fight. Edmund sees black miasma. The carriage suddenly swings open and someone swings at Edmund. Basilisks attack the carriage. Edmund promises himself to find his parents and defeat the basilisks. But Edmund can't find his parents. Edmund decides to take the chance and end it all. The basilisks consider him extremely dangerous and want to kill him. There are corpses all around, and Edmund is looking for his relatives. Only corpses and blood, but no parents. Edmund finds their lifeless bodies covered in blood. Edmund is horrified by what he sees. Edmund wakes up. He feels no better from the doctor's medicine. Packer brings him medicine to poison him. Edmund is unaware of the danger and asks for more medicine. The doctor prepares a new portion of poison for him. But Edmund is no better. He cannot get rid of the pain. Everyone told him that what happened to his parents was an accident. Even the Duke told him that it was all an accident. But Edmund doesn't believe that everything is an accident. His mother couldn't just die. This means that they were attacked by powerful people and his parents themselves were helpless. Edmund thinks it's all his fault. Edmund isn't sure he can turn a blind eye to this. That's why Edmund told Zenobia so. Edmund would very much like to make things right. They bring him a new dose of serum. Edmund is asked not to give up, but he hesitates. Edmund realizes he needs to pull himself together. But suddenly the door swings open. Elodie's footsteps are heard in the room. Elodie declares that she will save Edmund. The doctor is surprised. No one expected Elodie at such a late hour. Edmund is surprised. What does Elodie want to save him from? Elodie says she will take Edmund to safety. Edmund is surprised by her words. The doctor's plans are ruined. Elodie intervenes and saves Edmund from nightmares. The doctor is horrified. His plans failed. Zenobia did not kill the mouse. He wonders where Ratson gets such strength from. He tries to persuade Elodie to leave Edmund. But Elodie takes out a familiar hammer. She bravely declares to the impudent doctor that she will drive away Edmund's nightmares. Edmund says that the doctor helped him, but Elodie calmly takes his hand and uses magic. Elodie promises him that she will drive away his nightmares. Elodie takes Edmund away from the treacherous doctor. She says that Edmund will not be alone anymore. She brings him to her chambers. Edmund's nightmare repeats itself again. Edmund is transported back into a terrible dream. Edmund argues with his mother again about his studies. His mother says he needs to take care of himself. Edmund thinks that care is what killed his parents. Whatever Edmund did, he prevented the death of his parents. Edmund is horrified. Will the tragedy really happen again? The mother promises him that she will come back again. Edmund asks them to stop. Edmund lies unconscious on the floor. He is told that he was to blame for the massacre. The basilisks believe that they will place all the blame on him. They say that if his faith is enough, then everyone will consider Edmund a murderer. If you keep Edmund in a constant state of anxiety, he will break. The doctor believes that Edmund should be brainwashed and accused of murder. He orders the young man to do as he is told. Edmund wakes up on Elodie's lap. She tells him in a joyful tone that he has woken up. Edmund is shocked. Has he really been sleeping all this time? Elodie reassures him, saying that he had not been unconscious for long. Edmund is amazed. His mind has become clear. Elodie asks him about the nightmares. Edmund lies and says there were no nightmares. He remembered the entire conversation in his nightmares. Elodie confirms his suspicions about the manipulative doctor. Someone implanted new memories into Edmund's head. Elodie brings him a magical scented candle that helps fight nightmares. Elodie believes that a candle can help with nightmares. Edmund begins to be tormented again, feeling that he is to blame for everything. Edmund blames himself for not being able to protect anyone. The mouse calms him down, saying that it is not his fault. Edmund tries to find the answer to the question of who is to blame. The doctor consults with someone and reports his failure. The healer works for the basilisks and he's screwed up big time. The doctor puts all the blame on the mouse. He blames the Vaisliskis for everything, that he is a puppet in experiments on lying to the gods. But Basilisk didn't give a damn. He says that the healer is a fake doctor and the real one would have done better. But Basilisk had already destroyed all evidence of the conversation with him. The collaboration between the doctor and the Vaisilisks came to an end. The doctor is furious. He was simply used and received nothing from his cooperation. The doctor decides to get out of the situation dry. He wants to sow doubts about the Valkyriesons in Ratson. The doctor hopes that she will be disappointed and that he will run away. Edmund has not yet emerged from his influence and must be used. The doctor believes that he cannot be caught, but he hears the sound of footsteps on the threshold of his laboratory. Edmund comes through the door. It looks like a long conversation is in store. The doctor is surprised. Is Edmund really alone? He thinks that he will deal with Edmund himself. The doctor tries to praise Ratson and ingratiate himself with Edmund. He wants to brainwash Edmund again during the medical examination, but Edmund twists his arm and exposes the doctor. Edmund will never forgive the doctor for manipulation. The doctor denies everything, but his plans are over. Edmund is furious. How dare the doctor deceive him? The doctor is trying to blame everything on the Ratsons. He begs Edmund to give him a second chance. The doctor decides to tell about the basilisks. He tells Edmund everything and shows him the ball. But Edmund doesn't care about the doc. He's furious. The time of reckoning has come for Dr. Vasilisk. Edmund decides to personally punish the lying doctor. Edmund decides to subject the doctor to the same therapy that he himself was subjected to. We are shown a gloomy prison. The beastmen are ready to kill the doctor if ordered. Golf is ready to kill him. He was attached to Edmund's parents and loved them. We are told about Edmund's mother, Liana, and her husband, Benjamin, who was raised by the beastmen along with her. All the beastmen loved them. They were a very kind couple. For these people, the beastmen were one family. The beastmen in the estate owe their lives to the Duke's daughter and her husband. The nasty doctor is about to be beaten. The doctor is scared and begs Edmund to spare him. He sincerely repents to Edmund, but he is left to be torn apart by the beastmen. Edmund goes to his majestic grandfather. Edmund calmly closes the door and someone greets him. Edmund is surprised. This someone is Charon. Charon is dressed in the basilisk outfit and approaches him. Edmund is interested in what he wants to tell him. Charon has a request for Edmund. Charon wants to deal with the doctor, and Edmund is surprised by his determination to take revenge. Charon talks about many who died in the other wing, and he did it all. Young Basilisk always blamed himself for the murders. He decides to punish the doctor very cruelly, like a murderer. Elodie runs down the hallway. She senses something is wrong. Elodie wants to see the doctor alive and get information from him. But Elodie sees someone and decides to hide. She sees Karen leaving, not seeing anyone. Elodie mistakes Karen for her fairy grandmother. Elodie is surprised. What did Karen forget here? Elodie thinks the fairy and Karen look like Nyx the basilisk. She thinks that Nyx and the fairy are the same person, but perhaps Karen was also a fairy. Elodie is surprised. Why did the basilisks decide to help her? Sharon is running somewhere, and Elodie can barely keep up with him. Elodie decides to talk to Karen and calls out to him. Edmund also appears, and he and Elodie are surprised by each other. But Karen quickly runs away from Elodie. Edmund asks her if everything is okay. Elodie says everything is fine, but Edmund doesn't believe her. Elodie doesn't want Edmund to know the truth. She asks Edmund not to address her formally. Elodie asks Edmund to call her by her first name. Edmund says her name tenderly. Edmund asks what business she came here for. Edmund decides to answer any of her questions. Elodie decides to find out about the doctor and information from him. But Edmund answers about him somewhat absent-mindedly. He says that he knows nothing about the person who ordered this scum. Elodie thinks she might have made a mistake. But then Edmund and Elodie come to the conclusion that the insidious basilisk are again behind everything.